Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. As a villain, I really can't become stronger anymore. Chapter 21. Elsa quietly watched the statue weathering, as if in a short period of time, after thousands of years, a slight expression appeared on her pretty face for the first time. A little confused, a little lonely. After a long time, her lips slowly opened, and a shallow voice flowed from Elsa's lips. La, la la, la la la, la 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 la, la la la, 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 la. The soft melody is a bit eerie and a little sad. It's like comforting the dead life and caressing the dying soul. This is a requiem. Her voice was so soft that neither Ron nor Aurelia, who were obsessed with her below, heard her. Call. There was a slight emptiness in Ron's eyes. At this moment, he seemed to have entered a very special, ethereal state, and his consciousness was constantly flying, as if he was in the clouds. His arms were wrapped around Aurelia's delicate shoulders, and the body in his arms was trembling involuntarily. It took a long time before the lingering effects gradually subsided. Ron's consciousness finally fell from the clouds, and the expression on his face looked a little weird. Looking at Aurelia, whose eyes were still a little blurred, a feeling that could be called absurd emerged in his heart. Even though the pleasure just now was unforgettable for Ron, there was always an unreal illusion in his mind. He and Aurelia were progressing too fast. It was like there were countless threads entangled with him and Aurelia, constantly getting closer. Ron, who had returned to consciousness, felt that he seemed to see certain situations more clearly. Could it be that this was the effect of the sage's time? There was some confusion in Aurelia's eyes, but her thinking ability had gradually recovered, and with it came a strong sense of shame. Her pink cherry lips couldn't help but make a whimpering sound. Fortunately, the flush on his face has not faded away, and even if he is very shy, it is not obvious. Aurelia felt her face. No, her whole body was hot, and her body was twisting uneasily in Ron's arms, like a flexible water snake. Although her whole body was limp, Aurelia still struggled to get up. She simply arranged her clothes, and when she saw the pantyhose full of holes, she couldn't help but glance at Ron. Are you too rough? Are you a beast? The stockings are torn and can't be worn anymore. Stockings are quite expensive. For a nun whose monthly salary is not much, these stockings are very precious. Ron was stunned. Aren't stockings just for tearing? Aurelia was speechless. What kind of fallacy is this? Aren't stockings used to keep warm and prevent exposure? Who told you that stockings are made to rip? Aurelia decided not to continue arguing with Ron on this issue. This guy would definitely use all kinds of lies to convince her. After taking a look at the wrinkled and dirty nun's uniform and stockings, Aurelia exhaled helplessly. She finally understood that Ron was an out-and-out uniform maniac. This is normal. It is said that some nobles also like to have their lovers dress up as nuns, which gives them a blasphemous pleasure. It is really perverted. However, as the most devout believer of the goddess of dawn, does this constitute blasphemy against the goddess? Aurelia was a little troubled, biting her lower lip with her white teeth, and walked towards the back room. What are you going to do? You tore the stockings, I need to clean them up. Without saying a word, Aurelia got into the room, and before closing the door, she poked her little head out. No peeking. Ron was speechless. He had done everything he should and shouldn't do. Why should he be shy at this time? It's always such a weird time for a woman to be shy. Shaking his head, Ron stopped thinking about this difficult problem. He finally had time to check the changes in the system. 10 consecutive lottery tickets presented by Virgil. There is indeed a lottery system in the game. It's just different from the drawings of ordinary games, which draw powerful characters, powerful weapons, and exclusive equipment. In the game Goddess X Black Beast, the main draw is clothing. Clothes that can maximize the charm of the opposite gender can be given to NPCs that have been conquered in the game, unlocking more tempting and crazy scenes, and even come with VR live performances. Otherwise, Ceci is the primary productive force. Although this lottery system has been criticized, there is still an endless stream of people taking part in the lottery. In order to prevent players from drawing the costumes they want so easily, the game company has added a large number of props to pollute the prize pool. Low, intermediate and advanced magic, low, intermediate and advanced weapons and equipment, experience books, magic scrolls, potions, materials, silver coins, gold coins, etc. Under the crazy delusion, the probability of getting up clothing has reached an astonishing 0.01%, which is not guaranteed. Very conscientious. The boss of the game company sold dozens of Seaview villas at a loss. Open the system and find the lottery page. It is a huge carousel. A set of Fallen Angel Aerogay-made costume is the grand prize this time. Ron clicked and fired 10 times. I hope we won't be poor for 3 generations in a row. The turntable began to spin rapidly. Beep. The system prompts, congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 healing potions, 3 magic recovery potions, 2 physical recovery potions, advanced magic, chain lightning 1, and epic equipment, Ring of Hercules 1. Although with Ron's extraordinary 2-star strength, using chain lightning, the magic power required for advanced magic would probably drain him dry in an instant. But paired with a set of enhanced equipment, it is still barely usable. Regardless, it's a nice bonus. Compared to the Fallen Angel Aerogay-made costume. Although that costume is very beautiful and will definitely be very hot when worn on Aurelia, Ron prefers this kind of thing that can directly enhance his own strength. Another harvest, the Ring of Hercules. Epic equipment. According to the settings in the game, equipment is basically divided into 6 levels: White Ordinary, Blue Excellent, Purple Gold Epic, Golden Legend, and Colorful Myth, plus green suits that are not within the 6 levels. In the lottery system, the highest number of Golden Legends can be drawn, and the Purple and Gold Epics are already quite lucky. As for the Colorful Myths, they can only be forged with materials obtained from major dungeons. The improvements that a highly enhanced epic level piece of equipment can bring are absolutely exaggerated. Ron liked this ring more than the advanced magic of chain lightning. Ring of Hercules, Purple Gold Epic, Evolvable. Enhancement level, 0. Physical attack plus 67. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 164. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 172. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 169. When you wear this ring, you will understand what it means to be powerful. Ron's lips trembled slightly. The 3 additional attributes of the epic level equipment were all focused on strength. If a physical profession, such as a warrior, got this ring, it would definitely be called the best. However, if I remember correctly, his profession should be a mage, right? Could it be that he wants to take the route of a powerful mage? Fortunately, there are no occupational restrictions on equipment or anything else. As long as it can increase his combat effectiveness, Ron has always been willing to accept it. Moreover, it is hard to find an epic piece of equipment. If it is not strengthened, it will not be able to deal with the bugs that Ron has mastered. He placed a strengthening stone on the ring and made the standard prayer gesture of the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Praise be to the Goddess of Dawn. Ron lowered his voice so that Aurelia inside could not hear it. As soft white light emerged from the ring, the various attributes of the ring began to increase crazily. The white light flashed 13 times and finally stopped. Looking at the ring again, although it was not that he had seen better and more powerful equipment in the game, Ron was still shocked by the exaggerated attributes. The Ring of Hercules, Purple Gold Epic, Evolvable. It's hard to believe, it's just an epic piece of equipment. Enhancement level, 13. Physical attack plus 1394. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 164. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 172. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 169. Additional special effect. Infinite strength. The comprehensive strength attribute is increased by an additional 50%, which can be superimposed. Additional special effect. Natural divine power. The comprehensive strength attribute is increased by an additional 100%, which can be superimposed. Additional special effect. The Asylum of Hercules. The wearer can call upon the power of Hercules to come upon himself, but please be careful, your body may not be able to bear it. It can be used once every 7 days. When you wear this ring, you are a god, Hercules. The holder of this ring will start a special mission, the Inheritance of Hercules. Seeing the enhanced Ring of Hercules, Ron didn't know what expression he should make. At this moment, he just wanted to emphasize one point: I am really a mage. Looking at the power attributes on the panel that already exceeded 1,500 and the physical attacks that exceeded 5,000, Ron was very convinced that in terms of pure power, even if he were to compete with a power-type disaster-level master, he would probably not fall behind. The most special additional effect, the protection of Hercules. Just by looking at the introduction and usage restrictions, you can understand that this is a function used to save lives at special times. Moreover, it may cause a very serious burden on his body. Ron will not use this power easily unless necessary. As for special tasks, Ron didn't particularly care. After all, he still had a lot of tasks to complete and he didn't care about one more. He put the enhanced ring of Hercules on his finger, and a black line appeared on his forehead. Ron's original storage ring, the ring taken from Don Farouk's body, and the ring of Gris, a total of 3 rings, looks more and more like a nouveau riche. Inside the house, Aurelia cleaned the dirt on the nun's uniform and took off the tattered stockings. If other nuns saw the stockings full of holes, who knows what outrageous rumors would spread. In this respect, nuns are not much different from other women. They are all talkative women. Just after cleaning up, Aurelia suddenly covered her pretty face with her small hands, and her graceful body squatted down. God, is she crazy? Why did things develop to this point? Aurelia admitted that she did have some affection for Ron in her heart. She might really like Ron a little, but it shouldn't be to this extent, right? Why did he hand over his body to Ron so easily under the blue sky and broad daylight? She was obviously not such a girl. She had always dreamed of handing over the most precious things to a man she could trust for the rest of her life on her wedding night, instead of being as casual as she was now. The worst part is, looking back, I was the one taking the initiative throughout the entire process. It was she who took the initiative to confess. It was she who took the initiative to kiss Ron on the lips when Ron had turned around and refused. It was she who said that sentence that contained charm and heat, "Love me." It was she who took the initiative to bend down and show all her beauty in front of Ron. Ah, Aurelia screamed in a nice voice, dying, 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 Aurelia, you are really crazy. She also didn't understand why when she and Ron were left alone, the impulse in her chest seemed to continue to expand until it became uncontrollable. It was as if at that moment, her thinking was disturbed. She became more than just herself. She wanted to get closer, wanted to kiss, and wanted to become one with Ron. Only, Aurelia stood up, and her slender fingers fell on her lower abdomen involuntarily. Aurelia could still feel the burning heat. A faint smile appeared on her face. Although she was a little sad at first, overall, she didn't hate the feeling. Then, Aurelia suddenly thought of a very serious question. What if you get pregnant? She had to seriously consider this issue. After a long time, Aurelia sighed quietly. It is absolutely impossible to abort a child by taking a potion, which violates the teachings of the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Perhaps, she will be ridiculed and abused by other nuns, but, she will give birth to the child anyway. She may leave the church and find a more peaceful environment to raise the child well. Confirming her belief, Aurelia combed her messy long hair again before walking out of the room. The tall body reappeared in front of Ron. When their eyes met, both Ron and Aurelia were slightly startled. A layer of crimson appeared on Aurelia's pretty face, and there was confusion in her eyes that flickered rapidly. After not seeing each other for a short period of time, she felt Ron seemed to have become more attractive and masculine. Now, if Aurelia wasn't the only woman, Aurelia would even wonder if Ron was a succubus. The expression on Ron's face was equally surprised. He looked at Aurelia. She still had that graceful figure and beautiful face, but her aura. At this moment, Aurelia's body. The charm of women is almost revealed to the unprecedented limit. Every move, every smile, and even a look can make any man crazy. It was as if she suddenly changed from a nun to a succubus. No, it's not just a succubus. It's more like a fusion of a succubus and a nun. The temptation of the succubus and the holiness of the nun are perfectly integrated in Aurelia, making her charm even more amazing. Staring at each other, for a moment, the atmosphere between the two seemed particularly delicate. In the end, Ron reacted first and coughed softly, breaking the silence. Aurelia finally broke free from the confusion, her face turned crimson, and neither of them mentioned the matter again. Ron took Aurelia and searched the Eternal Freedom Sect's stronghold again, but unfortunately there was still no harvest. Although some notebooks were found, these notebooks had nothing to do with Ron. Finally, after failing to find the notebook, Ron and Aurelia left together, heading to the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Walking through Bruno Street, you can see many citizens along the way. Although they are comforted by the priests of the Church of the Dawn, you can still see pale fear on the faces of these citizens. Or rather, even the priests are creepy. People know what a total solar eclipse represents, and they all think it is the wrath of the Goddess of Dawn. After passing Bruno Avenue, Praia Town comes next. The picture and atmosphere peeking before my eyes have changed. There is no dirty and rotten air on Bruno Street, no crowded low-rise and dilapidated houses. This is the commercial district of Larnaca City. There are many shops on both sides of the street and it is extremely prosperous. In comparison, they are like two different worlds. Businessmen pursue profits. Maybe they also have beliefs, but they are far less exaggerated than ordinary civilians and clergy. They are also very afraid of total solar eclipses, but this fear does not last long. In comparison, making no money as the goddess's anger is even more terrifying. The Church of the Dawn Goddess is located at the junction of Praia City and the Noble District. It is also the area with the highest flow of people in the entire Larnaca City. This is especially true today. The fear caused by the total solar eclipse caused a large number of believers to go to the church to pray for the goddess's protection. There were a large number of luxurious carriages parked in front of the church, belonging to nobles. There were more civilian believers kneeling in the square in front of the church, surrounding the tall goddess statue in circles. Herman, who had just cleaned the paint off his body, didn't even have much time to rest before he was ordered by Virgil to lead a group of Dawn Knights to maintain order at the door. Herman was extremely dissatisfied with this job. He is the captain of the Dawn Knights, and he is also a noble. He has a noble status. How can he be allowed to perform such a lowly job? Virgil. Herman kept cursing in his heart, seeing the endless stream of believers who were still appearing, and their heads were as big as two. Inadvertently, Herman saw two familiar figures. Aurelia and Ron. The two men finally appeared. Oh, Ron, stay away from Aurelia, your shoulders are almost touching. In Herman's view, any skin-to-skin contact between Aurelia and anyone of the opposite gender, even just a polite hand-holding, hug, or even talking, is a violation of Aurelia's purity. Aurelia's purity can only be enjoyed by him. Herman couldn't control himself and wanted to rush over and separate the two people, but a gust of wind blew by and Herman's steps instantly froze in place. He saw it. Two smooth calves were exposed under Aurelia's fluttering skirt. His lips trembled involuntarily. Where are Aurelia's stockings? Aurelia is his, and he does not allow Aurelia to have even the slightest bit of dirt on her. Even breathing the same air as others will make Herman feel that Aurelia's purity has been tarnished. Ever since Aurelia rejected his request to get back together, his possessiveness towards Aurelia has only become stronger and stronger. But now, when he saw Aurelia's smooth calves blown by the breeze, a bolt of lightning seemed to flash through Herman's mind. Boom! His body seemed to have been shaken by an unprecedented violent impact. His originally normal face turned pale in an instant, and his chest felt like it had been hollowed out and there was a burning pain. Where are Aurelia's stockings? Where are Aurelia's stockings? Where are Aurelia's stockings? The length of the nun's uniform was not too exaggerated. He had seen black cloth wrapped around Aurelia's white ankles before, but now, that layer of delicate black had disappeared. Although Aurelia's nun's uniform is neatly packed, if you look carefully, you can still see some light marks and some abnormal wrinkles on the nun's uniform. What did Aurelia do to cause the nun's uniform to become what it is now? In addition, Aurelia's completely different and charming temperament from before, as well as her slightly unnatural walking posture. Herman didn't want to think about it, didn't want to believe it, but the more he didn't want to, the more pictures of this kind appeared in his mind uncontrollably. The two people's limbs were entangled. Aurelia holds her hand on the table. She was weeping in front of her, while he was showing off his power behind. Picture after picture emerged, and each scene caused the flames in Herman's chest to soar. Teeth kept clashing, and the unprecedented anger almost destroyed Herman's sanity. His eyes were opened with force, and there were scarlet bloodshot streaks all over the eyeballs, truly demonstrating what it means to have a split eye. There was a suppressed roar in his throat like a beast, his brain was almost completely crazy, and his rough palms reached his waist without knowing when, and he grabbed the hilt of the sword with all his strength. He couldn't wait to rush forward and cut Ron in half with one sword. Aurelia is his woman, and Ron, that fool, actually took away Aurelia's purity before him. Unbearable, unbearable, unbearable. The twisted face exuded strong resentment, but just after Herman had walked a certain distance, he had to stop. Herman must face the sad fact that he can't beat Ron. Even if Ron picked his fiancée, rushing over like this would be of no value except asking for humiliation. Herman gasped for breath. He tried his best to control the impulse in his chest. After giving Ron a look with his head lowered and communicating intimately with Aurelia, Herman turned around. Go in the other direction. Captain Herman, where are you going? This way. A knight spoke subconsciously when he saw Herman preparing to leave. Herman turned around suddenly, stared at his men with scarlet eyes, and growled in a low voice, "Shut your mouth." The knight's face was like an angry lion, and the knight's hair stood on end, and his body subconsciously leaned back. After Herman left, the knight finally came to his senses, with an unwilling smile on his face, and spat at the ground. Bah, what are you pretending to be? A knight captain? If you don't know better, you might think you were a bishop. If you hadn't had an awesome father, would this knight captain have been able to take your turn? You're talking about starting from the grassroots, and if you're gold-plated, and you're saying it so nicely. No matter how awesome you are, my fiancé has been loved by someone, silly green turtle. The knight cursed, but he could only curse because Herman's dad was really awesome. It was impossible for him to offend Herman's father, because that was an existence that he could not contact at all. Herman's figure disappeared beside the church. He wants to kill Ron, no matter what the cost. The other side. Aurelia took Ron into the church through the side door. The square at the main entrance was completely crowded with believers, and it was not easy to get past. At this time, the Church of the Dawn Goddess is no longer as influential as before, but the number of believers is still terrifying. Ron was no stranger to the Church of the Dawn Goddess. I have played it many times in the game, but the shock of seeing it with my own eyes is completely different. The church is bright and holy, with soft white and light gold as the main colors. Apart from the color, the architectural style is very Gothic. Above the mottled and simple bell tower, there is a tall obelisk, reaching into the sky, with densely engraved words praising the greatness of the Goddess of Dawn. Feeling the soft luster permeating the dome, there seems to be a faint sound of prayer echoing in your ears. The sound of the sound is like being baptized. Walking on the cobblestone ground, there was only the sound of Ron and Aurelia's footsteps, which was crisp and slightly lonely. Ron was suddenly a little worried. He had cursed the Goddess of Dawn many times, just when he was strengthening his equipment, and he would probably continue to curse her in the future. Is this considered blaspheming the goddess? Well, it shouldn't be a big problem. After all, it's impossible for the Dawn Goddess to hear his voice. Ron was thinking this, and suddenly, his advancing body paused slightly, and a dense layer of pimples suddenly appeared on Ron's face. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, as if steel needles were pricking into my skin. His throat moved involuntarily, and he felt that a pair of eyes were looking at him. Who is it? Could it be that he is an inspector of the Eternal Freedom sect? Did they find themselves defecting? Impossible. The Eternal Freedom sect should not move so fast. The most important thing is that this is the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. No matter how arrogant the believers of the Eternal Freedom sect are, they would not dare to break into such a place without permission. Herman, probably not. At that guy's level, he didn't have the strength to make his scalp numb. Ron tried his best to resist the urge to look around for anyone watching, and followed Aurelia at a leisurely pace. The only thing that gave him some peace of mind was that Elsa did not convey a death warning. It seems that although the other party is very strong, he does not intend to, at least, does not intend to kill him for the time being. Of course, there is also the worst possibility, that is, watching her own existence, her strength has exceeded the limit that the system can perceive, making Elsa unable to give any warning at all. If this is the case, then it would be easier for him to commit suicide directly. He is just a small villain, shouldn't he deserve to be treated like this, right? No one launched a sneak attack, no one came forward to talk. From the corner of the eye, I could only see some nuns and priests walking by in a hurry, and I could only see some gardeners clearing weeds in the garden, nothing unusual at all. However, Ron was very sure that the sight was still there. He couldn't tell what the other person wanted to do, but the feeling was very uncomfortable and even made Ron feel strongly uneasy. Finally, the temple appeared in front. Ron didn't even have time to listen to Aurelia's introduction, he just subconsciously quickened his pace. In the courtyard in front of the church, nuns walked around. A group of Dawn Knights walked quickly towards the church door, ready to replace their exhausted companions. A priest was instructing several gardeners to clean up the weeds in the soil. With a little force from his wrinkled fingers, he pulled up the weeds by their roots. The priest's prayers still echoed over the courtyard. The feeling of being watched disappeared. There is no doubt that the temple of the goddess of dawn is a place that one does not dare to set foot in even though one is watching her own existence. Ron exhaled slightly, his expression is normal, and did not show any joy or fear. To be precise, the location where he and Aurelia are now can be regarded as the entrance to the temple. After passing through a long corridor, they can actually enter the temple. This road is also called the Pilgrimage Road. It is used to cleanse the souls of believers so that believers can worship the goddess in the purest state. Not every cleric is qualified to enter the Holy Church. Normally, people like Ron who have not even truly joined the Church of the Dawn Goddess are absolutely not qualified to enter, but he is a prophet. This identity is more important than Gerald, the Archbishop. The corridor was dark along the way, and the walls on both sides were inlaid with milky white and soft golden gems, which emitted light like the rising sun. Solemn, pure and sacred. Even with Ron's character, he couldn't help but lower his head, repenting in his heart for insulting the goddess of dawn more than 100 times before. Of course, once you obtain higher grade and better equipment, you will definitely dare to do it again next time. After passing a few hundred meters, the church finally appeared in front of Ron. Compared with the buildings outside, the church seemed unremarkable. It was just a small room that was neither luxurious nor tall. Virgil's low voice of prayer came from the church. Aurelia knocked lightly on the door 3 times. The prayers paused briefly, then continued again. After a hymn was sung, the door opened. When he saw Ron outside the door, Virgil's eyes lit up, and a slightly exaggerated smile immediately appeared on his face. He even opened his arms and gave Ron a warm hug. "Oh, here comes the goddess of dawn. Can you please stay away from me? This guy probably hasn't showered for at least 2 days, and his whole body exudes a strong smell of sweat. Mr. Ron, my good brother, you are finally here." The relationship with Ron has been upgraded to that of good brothers. "Why didn't I know when I became brothers with you?" Ron was a little disgusted, but fortunately Virgil's hug didn't last too long. "Ron, if you don't come again, I might have to go and find you in person." He had a vague feeling that there was something unusual about Ron and Aurelia. But I couldn't tell what the problem was at the moment. Perhaps it was because of the special sanctity of the church, and the charm of Aurelia was not as strong as outside. After a brief pause, Virgil spoke again, and the smile on his face became more intense like a cunning fox. "Ron, what do you think of the Church of the Dawn Goddess?" "It's very good. It is indeed the oldest church among the 7 Orthodox religions." Ron expressed his sincere admiration. Among the 7 Orthodox religions, as the game plot develops, some churches are even completely destroyed. The Church of the Goddess of Dawn, despite its troughs, has always stood firm on this continent. This fact cannot be underestimated. Virgil grinned. "Well, brother, are you interested in joining the Church of the Goddess of Dawn?" "Don't worry, brother, although I am only a small bishop, I have some power in the church. As long as you join the church, I guarantee that you will be able to prosper here and no one can do anything to you," Virgil promised, patting his chest, "as if I was very loyal." "It would be strange to believe you. It would be okay if you said this 20 years later. Now, at the headquarters of the Church of the Dawn Goddess, anyone you pull out can slap you on the wall and you can't even buckle it off." Ron was complaining in his heart, but he didn't show it. "How is the salary for joining the Church of the Goddess of Dawn? How many hours do you work every day? Are there any weekends off? Also, how do you calculate overtime pay and how much is your monthly salary?" "Oh, my brother, don't worry. The treatment of the Dawn Goddess Church is definitely the best among the 7 Orthodox religions. With your status and ability, brother, you can get a salary of at least 60 gold coins a month. Believe me, this is not a good deal. For a small number, this is the only treatment the Archbishop gets. For translating ancient documents, there will definitely be rewards from the headquarters. You will definitely not be left behind. Aurelia stared at the two people in stunned silence, her lips trembling. You two, one a priest, a bishop, and the other a quasi-priest, were talking about gold coins in the temple in front of the goddess of dawn. Is it really appropriate? Aurelia felt that she could not stay here any longer, otherwise, her spirit might be contaminated. Shaking her head, Aurelia took the initiative to retreat. The smile on Virgil's face suddenly turned obscene. As for dual cultivation. Brother, what do you think of Aurelia? I think you two are a good match. It would be nice to have her accompany you to dual cultivation, right? Ron was speechless, and then he said after a while, I'm talking about resting Hugh. Virgil spread his hands. What I'm talking about is resting, Zio. Let Aurelia rest with you. After all, you are new here and are not familiar with the Church of the Dawn Goddess in Larnaca City. Having someone by your side can help you understand the city faster. His expression suddenly became exaggerated. Oh, my good brother, where have you been thinking about? You don't think I asked you and Aurelia? Goddess above, your soul is so dirty, you must join the Church of the Dawn Goddess and purify it. Ron was left speechless by Virgil. Why didn't he notice in the game before that this guy was so shameless? Has this guy been influenced by someone? Without giving Ron a chance to defend himself, Virgil dragged Ron to the statue of the goddess. The sculpture of the statue is so lifelike that just through the statue, you can feel that it is a very beautiful woman. She is beautiful, elegant, gentle, yet full of majesty. Her eyes drooped slightly, as if she couldn't bear to see the suffering in this world. Come on, show your faith in front of the goddess statue. If you can get the goddess's approval, you can become a believer in the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Then, according to the instructions of the goddess, arrange your career in the church. As if worried that Ron didn't understand, Virgil explained again, the occupation here refers to your work in the church. Of course, you will also learn some corresponding skills, but in general, it will not be the same as your original occupation. There is a big difference. For example, if you were originally a magician, then in the church, you will probably be assigned a job as a priest. Ron nodded slightly, indicating that he understood that these are the so-called main profession and auxiliary profession in the game. Only by joining the church can you obtain the auxiliary profession. This is normal, for example, the main profession is knight, and the auxiliary profession is dawn knight. Main occupational therapist, auxiliary occupational dawn pastor. It's more like opening up a small branch of your main profession. Of course, the auxiliary profession also has exclusive skills, but the number is not comparable to the main profession. He glanced at the statue of the goddess of dawn and felt a little uneasy. What if I can't get the goddess's approval? After all, he had cursed the goddess of dawn more than 100 times before. Virgil shrugged casually. Whether you can get the approval of the goddess is actually not important. What is important is getting the approval of the speaker here. I am the one who is talking here now. All this is just a formality. As long as I say that you have the approval of the goddess, then there will be no problem. After all, the goddess's approval. Virgil's expression suddenly turned a bit strange and mocking. According to the records of the church books, no believer has been approved by the goddess for at least thousands of years, including generations of popes. Our goddess may have ceased to exist long ago. The low voice filled the church with depression. Ron's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly remembered that the influence of the gods in the game has always been there, but no god has really appeared in front of the player from beginning to end. What is buried here? He exhaled, not thinking about this complicated issue for the time being, and lowered his head in a praying posture. Buzz. Soon, Ron's body trembled slightly. The eyes that had just been closed suddenly opened, and he felt the feeling of being watched again. In an instant, Ron's scalp went numb. Could it be that the eyes that looked at me before were from the goddess of dawn? Because he scolded the dawn goddess before, so he wanted to settle the score with him. Too stingy. Ron was horrified, his body tensed subconsciously, and the invisible pressure made Ron's body tremble, his throat kept squirming, and he swallowed hard. Beads of sweat rolled down from his forehead and rolled into Ron's eyes, causing burning pain. He tried his best to control his eyeballs, turning them and looking upward. Finally, he saw it. The beautiful and elegant goddess statue in front of her with lowered eyes had opened her eyes at some point. Those are a pair of eyes as bright as stars. Deep in the eyes, there is a black hole, which seems to be connected to the endless starry sky. Countless delicate, cylindrical tentacles drilled out of the eye sockets. The tentacles were soft white, like translucent jelly, winding in the void, twisting, squirming, and wrapping around Ron's body bit by bit. Also, are you the goddess of dawn, right? To actually create so many tentacles, isn't this the evil god's thing? Moreover, it's still hanging around him. Under extreme fear, Ron still couldn't help but murmur in his heart. He tried to struggle, but the indescribable pressure had enveloped his whole body, making him unable to move at all. Could it be that he really wants to die here? Why did Elsa, as a system, not give any warning at all? He subconsciously wanted to look for Elsa, but found that Elsa had separated from his body at some point and was floating quietly beside him. The long black and white hair is flowing gently. She didn't show the slightest panic because of Ron's predicament, as if she didn't care about the life or death of Ron, the host. Elsa was as quiet as before. She tilted her head, and her beautiful eyes stared quietly at the goddess statue opposite. On that beautiful face, Ron saw a different expression for the first time, and she was confused. Confused about why. As if infected by Elsa's tranquility, Ron's originally panicked heart gradually calmed down, and then he discovered that the situation was a little different from what he expected. The idol opens its eyes. The gaze of the goddess. But this kind of gaze is obviously different from the gaze he received outside the church before. The sight outside the temple made Ron feel like a light on his back, sharp and depressing. Although the goddess gaze made Ron panic, he didn't feel much else. At most, he could hear some delicate sounds in his ears. He couldn't understand what these ravings were trying to convey. There were no signs of him losing control and going crazy. Although the slender and transparent tentacles were wrapped around his body, they did not harm Ron's body. The tentacles just squirmed slowly, as if they were sensing something, although the touch was somewhat weird. Slippery and warm, just like a girl's delicate skin. Only Ron, and at most Elsa, could see all of this. Seeing in the eyes of Virgil next to him, Ron just stared at the statue of the goddess of dawn in front of him in a daze. This gave Virgil a strange feeling in his heart. Virgil knew that his brother was more, well, frank. He liked beautiful women and made no secret of it. Virgil didn't dislike such a guy. However, there are so many such people, in the church, among the nobles, there are a lot of them, even himself. Ahem, he, Virgil, is a gentleman, different from those people. The statue of the goddess was indeed perfectly carved. Even the most beautiful nun would be dimmed in front of the statue of the goddess of dawn. But this was the first time that Virgil saw an idiot who dared to stare at the statue of the goddess in a daze. This brother, isn't he thinking of some bad pictures in his mind? Seeing this, Virgil was afraid that his good brother would pick up a quill and write 2 obscene verses on the statue. Blasphemy. Even if the goddess of dawn probably no longer exists, this is definitely blasphemy. He can't keep watching his good brother fall like this. Even if he is lustful, there are many beautiful nuns in the church. He must not set his sights on the goddess. If the old-fashioned people in the church see this, there will definitely be an uproar. Brother, come to your senses. Virgil grinned and said, reaching out to pat Ron on the shoulder. But before his hand could touch Ron, the goddess statue in front of him suddenly burst into dazzling light. Virgil's face changed slightly and he subconsciously stepped back. Immediately afterwards, the light suddenly shrank. Right in the center of the light was a heart-shaped necklace that was as clear as crystal. Without the support of light, the necklace fell downwards, landing right in Ron's outstretched palm. The tentacles wrapped around his body had faded away, and Ron regained control of his body. He looked at the goddess statue in front of him with a complicated expression. The goddess statue also returned to normal, and its opened eyes dropped again, just like the one he saw at first. There is no difference at all. Ron didn't know what this meant, and he didn't even have a direction to think about. The only thing that was certain was that the goddess's change had not had any bad impact on him for the time being. He let out a long breath and looked down at the necklace in his palm. Heart of Ostara. Heart of Ostara. A special prop, it will become your second heart. The equipment did not belong to any grade, and the introduction was very simple and not difficult to understand, but Ron felt some kind of indescribable chill. Ostara, This is the taboo of the goddess of dawn. For a long time, Ron silently hung Ostara's heart around his neck. Virgil next to him had a dull face, his eyes were wide-eyed, and he hadn't even recovered from the shock just now. What on earth is going on? Could it be said that this is the gift of the goddess? Why did a favor that had not appeared for thousands of years, and that even the Pope had never received, befall Ron? Could it be that it was just because this guy stared at the statue with blasphemous eyes? Do you want to be so nonsense? Virgil simply couldn't understand it. His eyes were completely confused and he kept looking between Ron and the goddess statue. If he didn't know Ron's details, he would even doubt whether Ron had something to do with the goddess of dawn. What adultery? Hiss. To describe the goddess of dawn with adultery is simply blasphemy. Immediately afterwards, Virgil's body shivered violently, his face turned pale, and big beads of sweat began to roll down his face. He remembered that he had spoken nonsense in front of Ron before, saying that the goddess probably no longer existed. Will the goddess punish him because of his words? Virgil was horrified. Wait, if brother Ron got the gift of the goddess because he stared at the statue of the goddess with blasphemous eyes, although Virgil felt that such a goddess was simply sick, but, if he did the same thing, is it also possible? A certain thought emerged in his chest, and in an instant, burning heat filled his body. Virgil's throat was crawling. After a few seconds, the originally very smart bishop made a decision. He tried hard to adjust the expression on his face, with 3 parts contempt, 3 parts ridicule, and 3 parts blasphemy in his eyes, looking at the statue in front of him indifferently. Ah! The next moment, Virgil screamed, covered his eyes with his hands, and squatted down. There was blood flowing between the fingers. Seeing Virgil's face covered in blood, Ron was surprised. Brother, what's wrong with you? No, I'm fine. Virgil stopped screaming, put down his palms, and wiped his face with his sleeves. His eyes were still crimson, and when he saw Ron's figure dimly, he felt a surge of sadness and anger in his heart. Why? Everyone is doing the same thing. Why did Ron get the gift of the goddess, but he was punished by the goddess? Just because Ron is a little more handsome and younger than me. Goddess of dawn, isn't this too much of a double standard? Of course, Virgil would never dare to say what was in his heart. Once he said it, his eyes would not just be injured, but would probably turn into paste in an instant. What's even more sad is that Virgil found out that although he was punished by the goddess, not only did his faith not decrease, he was even more pious than ever before, because his goddess still existed. He was annoyed that he was useless, took a deep breath, suppressed the grief and anger in his heart, and even forced a smile at Ron. Oh, my brother, I'm fine, please don't worry, congratulations, you have achieved the goddess's approval. Now, let us see to what vocation you are fitted for in the church. As he spoke, Virgil looked at the Dawn Bible placed on the confession table in front of the statue of the goddess. The thick title page was opened out of thin air. It was clear that there was no wind in the church, but the pages were rattling. A few seconds later, the Dawn Bible stopped on a special page. On the page was a figure wearing a white robe and praying devoutly in front of the statue of the goddess. My brother, you seem suitable to be a priest. Puff. Ron squirted directly. What, priest? Are you sure this thing is correct? Ron really didn't expect that he actually had the talent to be a priest. Not to mention that Ron was originally a magician, and the corresponding auxiliary profession in the church should be a priest. In the game, Ron turns into an evil spirit after his death, taking the path of an evil warlock. Even with his equipment and even more exaggerated strength attributes than the berserker, Ron felt very normal about being a Dawn Knight. But what the hell is a priest? Is this a secondary occupation of a therapist? Ron looked all over his body and thought about his past and present lives, but he couldn't find anything that had anything to do with the priest. Even though Ron had opened many trumpets in the game and experienced knights, warriors, thieves, archers and magicians, he had never played as a wet nurse. Speaking of which, how does the pastor add some points? What skills should a priest have? Is one healing technique enough? Brother, are you sure you read this correctly? My eyes were injured, not blind. Virgil continued. Tomorrow, I will prepare priest's clothes and some magic books for you. Well, a pastor will be a pastor. Anyway, his power mainly comes from his own equipment, not his profession. What's more, in this world, professions and skills are not particularly strictly divided and restricted. Even if he is a priest, he can still slap Herman away and throw chain lightning. Ron and Virgil left the church together and came to the courtyard again. They no longer had the same feeling of being watched as before. Maybe that guy has left. Who knows? On the other side, Ron was walking in the church under the leadership of Virgil. But the direction they were heading seemed to be getting more and more remote, and before they knew it, they had reached the backyard. Virgil took out a rather bulky key that was half a foot long from his arms and carefully opened the courtyard door. Although it was not obvious, Ron could still feel some warning magic fluctuations on the courtyard wall, and he couldn't help but have a suspicion in his heart. Where on earth is this place, so cautious? Stepping into the backyard, it is very clean and there are no weeds on the ground. The only building is a medium-sized room. This room looks very special. There are not even windows on the walls. It is a completely enclosed secret room. Could it be that Virgil wanted to trick him into a secret room and then kill him quietly? Elsa didn't give any warning, so that probably wasn't the case. Although Elsa didn't react much in the previous 2 times, it is undeniable that Ron was not fatally threatened these 2 times. Brother Virgil, this is. Virgil smiled mysteriously at Ron. He always felt that this guy's smile had an aura of vulgarity. My brother, don't worry too much. I will take you to a good place. Virgil said. You must know that whether it is forced or voluntary, you were a believer of the Eternal Freedom sect after all. This is what you carry. Sin. So, you need to repent and wash away your sins before you can become a qualified believer of the goddess. Ron was speechless. There are so many rules in religion. This only house should be the so-called confession room. Ron did not doubt his presence and followed Virgil to the door of the confessional. After Virgil opened the door, he gently pushed Ron in behind. Then, with a click, the door was closed from the outside. Ron was stunned by this sudden change. He did not try to open the door of the confessional. With his current strength, it would not be difficult to break this door or even this wall into pieces. Ron just looked at the confession room curiously, then frowned, and the expression on his face became more and more strange. It was different from the imaginary confessional. There was no statue of the goddess or Bible. Instead, there was a wardrobe and a large bed. The magic lamp on the wall released a light pink light, covering the confessional room with a charming haze. There was some wine on a table. Next to them were some bottles and jars. Ron, who had a rich reserve of knowledge, could tell at a glance that those bottles contained potions to restore physical strength and energy. I walked to the closet, opened the closet door, and my lips trembled slightly. There were clothes hanging inside, and they were all women's clothes. There are 7 Orthodox religions and 7 different nun uniforms. There are even revealing and alluring gauze-like outfits worn by female believers of the Eternal Freedom sect. There are also the loose robes of magicians, the leather armor of archers and thieves that can show off their figure, the armor of female warriors that only covers the chest and buttocks and does not provide much defense, the dresses of noble ladies that fit the body curves, and the one-piece ones. Gel coats, even holy wedding dresses. On the upper floor, there are still many unopened stockings, including black and white stockings, suspenders and thigh-high stockings, all in complete categories. There are some special props on the lower floor. Bend down and pick up a candle. Low-temperature candle. There are also feathers, whips, ropes, tails. Ron's forehead was covered with black lines. Is this confession room a little too inappropriate? Squeak. At this moment, a hoarse sound came from the wall on the other side, and an inconspicuous small door was pushed open. A nun appeared in front of Ron. Ron's eyes lit up slightly when he saw this nun. The height of 1.75 meters is just perfect. She has a slender and graceful body, and the nun's uniform that has obviously been specially modified is quite enchanting. The hollow design exposes most of the woman's skin. The high slit hem allows you to clearly see a section of her thighs, which are as white jade. Black and white correspond to each other, making it more dazzling. The close-fitting nun's uniform brings out the beautiful and round curves. The waist is tied up and not even tight. The white silk sling is like a second layer of skin, fitting a pair of slender and moist legs, and the chest is covered with a layer. The white gauze has no effect of covering the body at all. On the contrary, it adds a hazy temptation. The 10 jade toes are crystal clear, and the light purple nails complement the snow jade-like skin, silently releasing enchantment, as if sending out a seductive invitation. Her face is beautiful, although she is slightly inferior to Aurelia. Her eyes are flowing, and her frown are all revealing the ultimate ecstasy that makes men drunkenly and dreamily. There is no doubt that this is a woman who exudes seductiveness in her bones and touches the wildness deep in men's hearts all the time. Even Aurelia, who is almost on the verge of turning into a succubus, is inferior to her in this aspect. Black high-heeled shoes made a crisp sound when they stepped on the ground. The mysterious nun closed the door. When she turned around, she saw Ron, especially the piece of candle held in Ron's hand. At that moment, the woman's dark pupils suddenly shrank, her body seemed to tremble, and the long black hair on her back also swayed. There was a clear flash of fear in her eyes. Ron was speechless and threw away the candle in his hand. "Beautiful nun, please believe that I have no interest in this thing." After a pause, Ron spoke again. "Can you tell me where exactly this is?" "Dear Mr. Ron," the nun finally spoke. Her voice was also very beautiful, as if she had received professional training and knew which tone of voice could stimulate a man's nerves better. "This is the nun's confession room. It will be up to me to serve Sister Cecilia to release the sins accumulated in your body." Almost at the same time, an ambiguous smile appeared on Virgil's face in the backyard. "Good brother, don't blame me. Brother, I really can't bear to see you go further and further on the evil path of blaspheming the goddess. Even if the goddess Ostara doesn't care, those old antiques in the church will not let it go. I have chosen the most beautiful nun with the best figure for you. Thank you, brother." On the other side, outside the backyard wall, Herman watched Virgil lead Ron into the backyard, and his eyes suddenly flashed with unprecedented excitement. Of course he knows what the church's backyard is. His body trembled violently, and he turned around to leave. He was going to find Aurelia. He was going to bring Aurelia to catch him, so that Aurelia could see clearly the true face of this Ron. A serving nun. Ron felt like he was a bit unqualified as a player. He didn't even know that there was a confessional for nuns in the backyard of the church, and he didn't even know that there were serving nuns in the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. A serving nun. Just by hearing the name, you can understand what the job of this kind of nun is. Thinking back carefully, most players probably don't know about the existence of serving nuns. If they really knew this, there would definitely be an uproar on the forum. I don't know how many players would leave the good poster in the post, hoping to get into the nun's confession room method. I don't know, is it because the players really didn't notice it, or is there a subtle difference between the game world and the real world? Sitting on the chair, stroking the wine glass on the table with his fingers, and looking at the nun in front of him, Ron felt a little familiar with her pretty face and the name Cecilia. Cecilia bit her lip lightly. It was her first time to serve. It was probably her luck to meet such a young and handsome man. At least, she didn't meet an aristocratic old man like other sisters. Those aristocratic old men often have twisted and sick personalities, and even their sisters were tortured to the point of being inhuman. That's why Cecilia was startled when she first entered the room and saw Ron holding a low-temperature candle in his hand. Fortunately, this gentleman seems to be just a little curious and has no interest in that aspect. At least, so far, this Mr. Ron has been quite quiet. The white teeth bit her lip lightly, and Cecilia knew that she could not continue like this. As a serving nun, she had to complete her work. Taking a deep breath, Cecilia said, "Sir, do you have any dissatisfaction? You can rest assured of the sanitary conditions here. Special staff will clean it every day. Everything here is brand new. Moreover, the sound insulation effect of the walls is very good, so you don't need to worry about being heard by others. If you are dissatisfied with my dress, you can choose any clothing you like in the wardrobe and I will fully satisfy your requirements. As for me, you can rest assured that you are the first guest I serve. Although I have no experience, as a serving nun, I have learned this knowledge and I can definitely satisfy you." Cecilia's words were somewhat sad. It's like she's selling a product, her own body. Probably no girl would want to do this, but Cecilia has become accustomed to it. This is the fate of serving nuns. Ron let out a breath and looked at the nun in front of him with a slightly complicated look in his eyes. He finally remembered, this was a character in a side mission. Among the players, Cecilia, codenamed Bloody Nun, Only if you enter the Church of the Goddess of Dawn in Larnaca City at night within 1 month before the game time, can you have a chance to encounter this NPC. Cecilia will entrust you to help send money to a man named Malta outside. That was her boyfriend, and the money was also saved by Malta as a way to redeem himself, break away from the church, and get married. But Cecilia had no idea that her boyfriend was a pure scumbag. He had another lover outside who was already planning a wedding. As for the money required for the betrothal gift and wedding, it naturally came from Cecilia's money. In the game, Cecilia's mission has 2 endings, both tragic. The first line is to keep giving money to Mart, not telling Cecilia the truth, and maintaining the false happiness in Cecilia's heart until the city of Larnaca is destroyed. The second line tells Cecilia the truth. The hope of the innocent nun was shattered. Her will collapsed and she was corroded by the Lord of Blood and Destruction. On her boyfriend's wedding night, she broke into the wedding scene with a kitchen knife, killed her boyfriend's whole family, and even caused a large number of wedding attendees were implicated and eventually guillotined. Cecilia is very talented, and the evil god is not just someone who would pay attention to her. Being noticed by the evil god is a kind of recognition. She was originally just a powerless nun, but after being contaminated, she was able to massacre dozens of people at the wedding scene with a kitchen knife. Even the entire law enforcement team that came to quell the incident was killed. In the end, it was Gerald, the Archbishop, who appeared in person to suppress Cecilia. If Cecilia had not embarked on this path, but practiced normally like Aurelia, she would have achieved quite a lot, and there would probably be one more heroine in the Twilight Continent. Thinking of this, Ron looked at Cecilia with even more pity. Especially considering that Cecilia works as a serving nun, this woman is even more pitiful. Ron remained silent, but the look he gave her made Cecilia a little uneasy. She didn't know Ron's identity, she only knew that he was a very distinguished guest. Bishop Virgil specifically told us that we must serve well and never slack off. If she couldn't satisfy Ron, then, as if thinking of a certain scene, Cecilia's pretty face suddenly turned pale, and her slender body trembled. Seeing Cecilia's fear, Ron smiled softly. "Miss Cecilia, please be confident. You are very beautiful. I have no dissatisfaction with you." Perhaps because of Ron's gentleness, Cecilia's heart, which had been hanging on her head, was finally relieved. There was also a faint smile on her face, and for the first time she took a serious look at the guest in front of her who was about to take away her virginity. Only then did Cecilia discover that this gentleman named Ron was handsome, but he did not make people feel weak at all. On the contrary, he also exuded a strong and fiery masculine aura. This is a very charming man. This thought flashed through Cecilia's mind. No matter how handsome and noble Ron was, it had nothing to do with her, because there was already an irreplaceable existence in Cecilia's heart. Maybe it was just a childhood joke. But in Cecilia's heart, it was also the purest emotion, which would not be changed by any temptation. Ron stretched, then waved to Cecilia, pointing to the chair next to him. "Sit down." Cecilia sat aside a little uneasily. Ron was completely different from the guests the sisters said, which made all the responses Cecilia had prepared in advance come to nothing. "Chat with me," Ron said. "In the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, are there many serving nuns like you?" Cecilia bit her lower lip and nodded. "There must be more than 100 people. They are all young nuns adopted by the church since childhood and carefully trained." After a pause, Cecilia continued, with a slightly self-deprecating tone, "Are you disappointed that the Church of the Dawn Goddess shouldn't be like this? But this is normal. The Dragon Clan is on top and the world is at peace. This is a good thing. At least, in the eyes of the royal family and nobles, this is a good thing." Cecilia was very talkative, and Ron's gentleness made her put aside her worries. Fear is the most powerful force that can spread faith. There has been no war for many years, people's fear has disappeared, and the number of church members is decreasing. The royal family does not have to worry about external invasion, and they are also trying their best to weaken the church's influence on the world. And if the church wants to maintain its existence, it has to think of some ways to maintain relationships with the upper class and expand the church's income. And holy nuns often make many powerful nobles and wealthy businessmen crazy about them. Actually, the situation of the Church of the Goddess of Dawn has been settled. Some churches are about to become prostitutes. Ron chatted a lot with Cecilia, and he was surprised to find that this serving nun had unusual insights into the current situation in the Twilight Continent. He verified each other in his mind with the information he knew, and picked out the information that didn't match. In the real world, the situation of the 7 Orthodox churches seems to be even worse than in the game. Of course, it is also possible that these secrets have not been unearthed by the players, and Ron is temporarily unable to determine which situation it is. "You volunteered to become a serving nun?" Ron asked, raising his eyebrows. Cecilia nodded. "Yes, although I occasionally regret my decision, I know that if I had not chosen to become a serving nun, I would never have survived until now. Maybe one morning, people would be on the garbage dump found my body." "Have the nuns been around long?" "Yes, according to records, it has been nearly 1,000 years. Only the most distinguished guests have been able to obtain the service of the nuns. The first guest we hosted was named," Cecilia recalled, "Archie." Ron raised his eyes. "Archie Boulder?" Cecilia immediately nodded her head. "Yes, that's right, that's the name, Archie Boulder." Archie Bold has never appeared in the main line of the game, but is a frequent guest in various ancient classics and cipher texts. This is a type of background board in the game that affects the direction of the world. It is said that Archibald invented the ancient universal text in the Dusk Continent. He is a guest of the dragon clan that rules the world. He modified the magic system to make the use of magic easier. He is revered as a sage, also called a demigod. I didn't expect that this great senior had actually entered the nun's confession room. I wonder what he confessed to. What did he do? Ron suddenly became curious. Cecilia's face became very strange, and she spread her hands. "He took away all the 27 serving nuns in the church at that time." Puff. Ron almost squirted. This old man is not a good scholar. According to the introduction in the game, he is a very old-fashioned scholar who likes research more than women. I didn't expect that there would be such a romantic affair. Sure enough, there is often a big difference between the recorded situation and the real situation. Ron couldn't help but want to laugh, but the smile suddenly froze on his face. He suddenly remembered that there was an ID named Archie Boulder on the official game forum. Nickname, Nun Terminator, Archie Boulder. A master with hundreds of thousands of fans on the player forum and the #1 research party on the game, he once analyzed the ancient text in the game and published it on the forum. This guy is an out-and-out nun. No matter how beautifully modeled or lovable the other female characters in the game are, Archibald has no interest in him. This guy only has a special love for the nuns in the church, Belle. It is said that this person conquered a total of 133 nuns, and was nicknamed the Nun Terminator. I always feel that the Archibald described by Cecilia is somewhat similar to the Nun Terminator on the forum. For a moment, the expression on Ron's face looked quite strange. He glanced at Cecilia. What else has this Archibald done? Cecilia glanced at Ron in surprise. What Archibald did was known to almost everyone in the Twilight Continent, especially the church. Moreover, because Archibald was so powerful, even history books had a thick chapter dedicated to Archibald. As a scholar, Ron couldn't possibly not know these things. However, Cecilia still responded obediently. He stole all the serving nuns from the 7 Orthodox churches. It is said that the number of nuns gathered around him exceeded 300. During that time, whenever Archibald appeared in its territory, the church would carefully hide the nuns for fear of being discovered by Archibald. Even so, several saints were still captured by Archibald. Taken away. Ron's lips trembled slightly. Don't the 7 Orthodox churches want to kill him? Who knows what happened 1,000 years ago, but most of them had ideas in this regard, but they obviously failed. The 30 years that Archibald was active were simply a nightmare for the 7 Orthodox churches. The 7 Orthodox churches lived in extremely humble circumstances during those 30 years. Even serving the nuns was suspended for 30 years. They were only restarted after Archibald's death. Ron quietly squirmed his throat. Then has he done other more significant things? For example, inventing writing, improving magic. Cecilia shook her head slightly. Archibald didn't do any of this. It was the sage Partridge who invented ancient writing and improved magic, not Archibald. Ron's breathing hitched slightly. Partridge, this is definitely a completely unfamiliar name, and I have no impression of it at all. However, the title of Archibald Sage fell on Partridge. A conjecture emerged in Ron's mind, and this conjecture made his scalp tingle. He couldn't help but think of the prompt the system had given him. The repairman repairs the world line, and the world line returns to normal. The Archibald in Cecilia's mouth is obviously more like the great god on the forum who loves nuns. There is no doubt that Archibald's appearance changed the direction of the world. After the world line ended, a partridge reappeared, taking Archibald's original position and returning the world line to normal. If so, what is Archibald's ending? Ron's eyes suddenly widened, and he looked at Cecilia suddenly. His gaze even made Cecilia's heart tremble. How did Archibald die in the end? If Mr. Ron wants to know Archibald's experience, you can go to the library. The church has it. What I wrote down is just a rough idea. It is said that Archibald was originally a handsome man, but just a few years before his death, his personality suddenly changed drastically and he became crazy. In the end, he even flew into the sky and pointed at people in full view of the public. The sky cursed loudly. What did he curse? Cecilia shook her head. Archibald learned filthy words and blasphemous sounds. No one can understand his curses. He only translated them from syllables, which seems to be something. Fake squid maze or something. Filthy words brought divine punishment, thunder fell from the sky, and Archibald died. Hiss. Ron leaned back. Fake squid maze. Dirty words. Blasphemy. At this point, Ron was completely convinced that Archibald was a time traveler like himself. His existence has undoubtedly changed the direction of the world. Like most time travelers, the most important thing after time travel is to open a harem. It's just that this guy went a little too far. There are more than 300 nuns, but they don't know if their kidneys can bear it. The worst thing is that Archibald does not have system prompts and knows about the repair of the world line like himself. By the time Archibald noticed something, it was already too late. At the last moment of his life, the curse directed at the sky was perhaps the last resistance and curse in despair, and then, in exchange, the thunder came to the world. Ron's throat squirmed slightly. What about himself? What will happen to him? After the world line is restored, what fate will be arranged for him? Originally, Ron didn't take this system prompt seriously. It always felt very far away. As long as he was careful, it shouldn't be a big problem. But now, Ron understands that the world line closure may be the most terrifying enemy for time travelers. Ron found that he was calmer than he thought, and while he was suppressed in his chest, he even felt a little inexplicable impulse. The famous General MacArthur once said, "Danger makes people excited." I didn't expect that just talking to Cecilia casually out of boredom would yield such great results. After a long while, Ron let out a breath. He stretched out his hand and gently rubbed the ring, then lined up 10 gold coins on the table. Cecilia's eyes lit up slightly. She needed money. If you want to redeem yourself from the church, you need money. I want money to marry Malta. If you want to live happily together after marriage, you also need money. Cecilia's elegant neck squirmed slightly, longing for these gold coins but not reaching out to take them. She looked at Ron in surprise, not understanding what Ron meant. "This is your reward for chatting with me, beautiful lady." Ron suppressed the surge in his chest and his expression returned to normal. Then he stretched his arms vigorously and yawned, feeling tired. Cecilia knew it was time for her to do something. She knelt obediently in front of Ron. Her slender fingers trembled slightly, but she reached out to Ron firmly and prepared to take off Ron's robe. But, my wrist was caught. Ron shook his head at Cecilia. "Cecilia, I just want to sleep." "I'm sorry, I'm really sleepy." "It's not that you are not charming enough." Cecilia watched with some surprise as Ron stood up and lay directly on the bed. The pillow was a bit hard, which made Ron feel uncomfortable, so he threw it aside. This is not a pretense, Ron is really tired. Since coming to this world, Ron has almost no time to rest. First, he had a not very fierce battle with Herman and Don Farouk. After entering the Soul Crossing, Giorgio almost exhausted his energy again, and then had a very fierce fight with Aurelia. Now that he knew about Archibald, his brain had received too much information in a short period of time, and it had basically reached its limit. Cecilia's pretty face was confused. After a while, she silently walked to the bedside and sat down. She lifted Ron's neck with her slender fingers. Soon, Ron felt a breathtaking softness and elasticity coming from under his neck. It seems that you can smell waves of attractive fragrance in your nose. He lay on Cecilia's lap. Looking upward, the obstacle is too big and I can't see Cecilia's pretty face. It might be more comfortable this way. The small hands gently pressed Ron's shoulders to relieve Ron's fatigue. The chaos in his heart was calmed, and he slowly closed his eyes. Not long after, a slight shout appeared in the room. Outside the backyard, Herman, who had left before, returned. He was like a timid little thief, lying on the door and peering into the backyard through the crack in the door. Ever since Ron went in, he never came out again. A proud smile appeared on Herman's face. He had already sent someone to notify Aurelia. He wants to catch the culprit. When Aurelia comes over, he will reveal Ron's true face in front of Aurelia. A gust of night wind blew, and Herman's body shivered violently. He sneezed, and 2 pieces of mucus flowed from his nostrils. As night fell, the noisy church returned to tranquility. The moonlight filled the ground, covering it with a layer of white frost. It's getting colder. Outside the backyard door, Herman kept rubbing his nose, feeling that his nasal passages were blocked by thick fluid. However, Herman never left from the beginning to the end, and kept staring at the room inside through the crack in the door. A flash of excitement flashed across his face. Once Aurelia saw the ugly scene of Ron and the nun in bed with her own eyes, all her good feelings towards Ron would be shattered at this moment. Aurelia will definitely not be able to tolerate this kind of betrayal, and by then, her fiancé will come back to her. As expected of him, he could come up with such a smart solution. Herman sighed at how smart he was. He couldn't wait to see that scene. Ron's expression would definitely be very exciting. The only pity is that Aurelia has probably lost her purity. But this time, Herman will not give up. He didn't know what was going on, but he always felt that Aurelia seemed to be getting more and more beautiful and attractive. She was obviously a nun, but she was releasing a temptation like a succubus. Could it be that because Aurelia has become someone else's woman, taking someone else's woman away will make him feel doubly excited? What kind of twisted fetish is this? I don't know how much time had passed. His stiff body trembled. Herman raised his head and glanced at the sky. A light fish belly white had appeared on the horizon. It's been several hours, right? Why hasn't Aurelia come over yet? In the front yard, some early gardeners can already be seen, cleaning the church garden. Some nuns have already begun to pray in front of the statue. As time passed, Herman's mood became more and more anxious. Just as the first ray of sunshine in the morning shone, crisp footsteps finally came from behind. Herman's eyes suddenly lit up and he turned around. Looking at it, Aurelia's slim body suddenly appeared in front of her. Still so beautiful, her face was cold, and her amber eyes glanced at Herman. Why did you ask me to come here? The engagement has been terminated, and there is no longer any relationship between us. In the future, don't let anyone send me letters, and don't ask me to meet in private. I'm afraid Ron will misunderstand. She came here just to tell Herman this, hoping that Herman would stop entangled in the future. Moreover, this is also a church, and she is not worried about what Herman will do. Ron again. Just hearing this name, the irritability in Herman's heart became a little uncontrollable, but for the sake of the plan, Herman still took a strong breath and barely suppressed the irritability in his chest. His originally handsome face, showing a twisted smile. Don't you want to see what Ron, who you miss so much, is doing right now? Aurelia's beautiful eyes narrowed into slits. I don't want to. Herman's breathing was slightly stagnant. How could he answer this? Is this different from what was planned? He took a deep breath and suppressed the annoyance in his heart again. Aurelia, I just want you to see Ron's true face clearly. I know that I hurt you before, and I don't expect your forgiveness, but I also don't want you to be deceived by that Ron. As long as you come with me, I promise that I will never pester you again. This guarantee seemed to make Aurelia a little moved. Seeing that Aurelia's attitude seemed to have softened a bit, Herman quickly took out the key and opened the door to the backyard. Yes, this guy had the key. His status was special, and there were naturally many people who fawned over him. No matter what he wanted, it was just a matter of words. However, he did not dare to enter the backyard, for fear that if he got too close, he would be discovered by that guy Ron. Herman would not forget the feeling of being slapped against the wall so easily. Seeing Aurelia following behind, Herman became even more excited. He quickened his pace and rushed to the small house. He glanced at the closed door and didn't even bother to look for the key. He kicked up and with a bang, the door was kicked open. The scene inside the house was instantly exposed to Herman and Aurelia. "Look, Aurelia, this is the Ron you like. He is so, huh?" Herman opened his arms exaggeratedly and declared to Aurelia. His voice got stuck. The situation in the room seemed a little different from the mess he expected. The room was neat and tidy, without any clutter at all. Even the bed didn't have many wrinkles. Ron was sleeping with his head on Cecilia's soft legs. Hiss. Herman's body trembled violently. He had been out in the cold wind all night, but Ron, a idiot, actually slept comfortably all night with his pillow on the beautiful nun's thigh. He was ready to strangle Ron. However, now is not the time to think about this. Herman took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, showed a proud look on his face, and pointed into the room. "Look, Aurelia, this is Ron. After I separated from you, I immediately hung out with another nun. Although the two of them didn't make peace together and were a little less convincing. But that didn't matter. Wake up, this man has never liked you. All he desires is your body. When he gets tired of playing with you, he will abandon you." In the room, Cecilia was also startled by the sudden movement, and her face turned pale. Before Cecilia could say anything, Ron, who had been resting on his lap, was also awakened. He rubbed his eyes, finally straightened up, and glanced at Cecilia with a slightly cloudy look. Only then did he realize, this beautiful nun probably didn't rest all night. This made Ron very embarrassed. "Miss Cecilia, I'm sorry, I worked hard for you last night." Cecilia almost collapsed. "Mr. Ron, now is not the time to say such things." Cecilia was very smart. From Herman's words and Aurelia's attitude, she could roughly guess what was going on. What Ron just said was nothing more than adding fuel to the fire. Herman was as excited as a child. He almost couldn't help but jump up. Originally, he was worried that Aurelia wouldn't believe it because the picture wasn't exciting enough, but what Ron just said almost confirmed his decision. Accusation. Have a hard night. What can a serving nun do after a hard night? This was enough to prove how crazy the two of them had been last night. At this moment, Herman felt that all the hunger and cold he had endured last night had paid off. He couldn't wait to look at Aurelia, but Aurelia's madness did not appear in his imagination, and her beautiful face was as calm as ever. What is going on? Ah, by the way, this is the so-called calm before the storm. It must be like this. How calm Aurelia appears now, how crazy she will be when she loses control later. Ron seemed to finally feel this oppressive and weird atmosphere. He blinked and the turbidity in his eyes finally dissipated. Seeing Aurelia, Ron seemed a little embarrassed. He scratched his head because he was in Cecilia. Turning around on her legs, her hair was a little messy. Aurelia. I'm sorry. Aurelia smiled softly. Herman's body was trembling. Look, what a terrifying smile. Ron, you don't need to apologize. Yes, there is no need to apologize, it's over between you two, haha. I said before, I don't care how many women you have around you. Crunch. The excited expression on Herman's face suddenly froze. He was stunned. He could almost fit an egg into his mouth, and his eyes were like copper bells. His neck was like a rusty machine, creaking as he looked at Aurelia little by little. He wanted to see some different emotions on Aurelia's face, but he was disappointed. Those eyes, there was only deep affection in his eyes that couldn't be turned away. Hiss. Does Aurelia really not care how many women Ron has around him? Why is this happening? So what's the point of starving and freezing this night? At this moment, Herman only felt like a clown. At this moment, Aurelia's nose twitched slightly. Besides, you and Sister Cecilia didn't do anything, right? I don't smell that stuff. Don't smell that stuff. What does it smell like? Could it be? Buzz. In an instant, Herman felt as if someone had punched him hard in the chest. His heart ached. Herman's mouth suddenly opened, and with a pop, a mouthful of bright red blood spurted out. Poor Herman was so angry that he vomited blood. Aurelia even knows what that stuff tastes like. Although after seeing Aurelia without stockings on her legs, Herman began to worry about what had happened between Aurelia and Ron. However, there are still some thoughts in my heart from beginning to end. Maybe the stockings were accidentally torn while walking and had to be replaced. And even if something happened between the two of them, Herman felt that he could accept it. After all, Aurelia was becoming more and more attractive now. But when he heard these words from Aurelia, Herman realized that his ability to bear it was not as strong as he thought. He originally thought that even if Aurelia gave her purity to Ron, it was just an impulse driven by anger and sadness. He never thought that it would be so filthy and messy. Do you even know what that stuff tastes like? How did she know? Did she taste it? The goddess I yearn for is just a female beast kneeling in front of other men and serving her diligently. The last hope was shattered. As more and more unbearable images appeared in his mind, Herman seemed to be going crazy, clutching his head with both hands and pulling the hair on his head. Clusters of golden hair were suddenly pulled from the top of the head by Herman and fell down. That crazy look startled Cecilia, and her face suddenly turned pale. The look on Aurelia's face next to Herman was even more instinctive as she sensed danger, and her slender legs subconsciously moved towards Ron's position. At this moment, Herman suddenly raised his head. The originally golden eyes had turned scarlet red, and the pupils were bloodshot. Like a crazy wild dog. Cruel and vicious. That look frightened Aurelia, and her retreat speed suddenly accelerated. But it's too late. Herman is a knight, he has quite good explosive power, and the distance is very close, even Ron can't stop him in time. With a low growl, Herman rushed out and appeared beside Aurelia in an instant. He grabbed Aurelia's wrist and tried to push him away. He was so hard that Aurelia felt the sting on her wrist as if it was about to be crushed. What are you doing? Let me go. Aurelia struggled, but she couldn't break free at all. Herman's face showed a nervous, scalp-numbing smile, his scarlet tongue kept licking his lips, and his voice was accompanied by a thick breath. Aurelia is so beautiful make him crazy. Aurelia, why are you doing this to me? I love you so much, can't you feel it? You should understand that I am better than Ron, and I am the one who is truly worthy of you. Come back. I won't care that you have been violated by this Ron, I will be as good to you as before. Herman's voice was trembling, pleading. This was perhaps the most humbling moment of Herman's life. He just wanted Aurelia to come back to him. I once said how flamboyant it is when an engagement is cancelled, and how humble it is when praying for reconciliation. He hoped that Aurelia would change her mind, and stared into Aurelia's eyes expectantly, hoping to see the emotion in those amber eyes. But soon, Herman was disappointed. There was no emotion in his eyes, only indifference and ridicule. Dream, are you excellent? In my eyes, you can't even compare to one of Ron's toenails. Does his so-called love mean that when his fiancée may be violated, he willfully humiliates, abuses, and ruthlessly terminates the engagement? Aha! The scarlet color in Herman's eyes disappeared, replaced by darkness and emptiness, as if he had lost all hope in an instant. A few seconds later, Herman suddenly raised his head. His face had returned to normal, as handsome as usual. He even smiled at Aurelia. Really? Then, just go die. A very soft voice. Since you can't get Aurelia, let's destroy her. As he spoke, Herman raised his left hand, and the 5 curved fingers, like the claws of some kind of beast, stretched out towards Aurelia's head little by little. In an instant, Aurelia's scalp felt numb. No one could see that, just above the small house, a thick cloud had appeared at some point. In the rolling dark clouds, purple thunderbolts kept flashing. Paw, 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 paw. A bolt of lightning suddenly fell and hit Herman's head directly. Immediately afterwards, the second, third, fourth, fifth, 5 lightning bolts, ahem, it's chain lightning. Dense arcs of electricity instantly covered Herman's body. Amidst the sizzling sound, Herman's body fell into stiff paralysis, unable to move, and only his eyes could barely turn around. From the corner of his eye, he happened to see Ron getting up at some point next to the big bed, and the dark Bible was turning over the windless pages in Ron's palm. Ron also didn't expect that the advanced magic he just obtained would be put to use so soon. Ron was very calm throughout. Even when Aurelia was controlled by Herman, Ron did not lose control. Ron knew very well that although he was very powerful, his speed was not as exaggerated as his strength. It would be very difficult to pull Aurelia away before Herman. And chain lightning is a good choice. First of all, although this is a high-level magic, but, how to put it, Ron's own magic value is very bad. He can barely use this magic, but the power can only be subtle. To describe it, in this case, there is no need to worry that the damage of chain lightning will affect Aurelia. Secondly, chain lightning has a pretty good paralysis effect, which can buy time to save Aurelia. As for whether Aurelia would also be paralyzed, Ron couldn't care less about it. Cecilia next to Ron reacted very quickly. The moment Ron just used magic, Cecilia had already rushed over. Before Herman could break free from paralysis, he grabbed Aurelia's shoulders and pulled Aurelia away with force. When Herman finally returned to normal, the two nuns were already hiding behind Ron. The empty eyes stared at Ron silently, and only when staring at Ron, a trace of strong hatred would appear in the depths of those dark eyes. Herman's sanity had been completely destroyed by hatred. He had forgotten how big the strength gap between the two sides was, how powerful Ron was, and what kind of humiliation he had suffered before. He just wanted to kill Ron. Kill you, kill you, kill you. Her lips murmured nervously, and the next moment, the magic power in her body was pushed to the limit by Herman, and dark red flames seemed to be burning on her body. Herman is worthy of having a relatively strong bloodline, and his strength seems to have improved a lot compared to before, probably from a 4-star panic level to a 5-star panic level. In an instant, the entire room was flooded with scalding heat. The invisible impact disrupted everything in the room, blowing Ron's robe and making a rattling noise. Then, just like that night, Herman's body turned into a meteor again, and his fingers covered in fire were like the claws of the most ferocious beast, tearing towards Ron's throat. Ron raised his left hand and waved it gently. Just like chasing away an annoying fly in front of you, the movement is easy and comfortable. The next moment, there was a bang. Herman's body immediately flew backwards and hit the wall hard. The walls, which were quite soundproof, collapsed. Along with the ruins, Herman's body rolled out directly. Hiss. Cecilia's eyes were shining next to her, and she looked at Ron with a strange look. Mr. Ron really holds a grudge, just because Herman threatened Aurelia, so he just beat Herman away. This time, I'm afraid I'm going to beat Herman half to death. She's really stingy. Aurelia is Herman's fiancée, right? Why is Mr. Ron angry and stealing someone else's fiancée? Shouldn't he feel guilty? On the other side, Aurelia's face was flushed. My heart is full of sweetness. From Ron's casual slap, Aurelia could feel Ron's friendship and protection for her. Beep. The system prompts that the White Saint Aurelia's favorability towards the host has increased, and her current favorability is 85. Ron's forehead was covered with black lines. Feeling the gazes of Cecilia and Aurelia, Ron helplessly spread his hands. I didn't even try. Puff. Herman, who had just gotten up from the ground and had several broken ribs, could not bear the blow of these words, and another mouthful of blood spurted out far away. The two nuns admired him more and more. He was indeed Mr. Ron. Although he was a gentleman, he was more ruthless than anyone else when he needed to be ruthless. It is not only necessary to attack the enemy physically, but also to completely destroy the opponent mentally. Chapter 31. The looks in Cecilia and Aurelia's eyes told Ron that these two beautiful nuns did not believe what he said at all. What he told was the truth, but no one believed the truth all this time. He had really worked very hard to control his strength just now, with a strength value of 1,500 points and a physical attack power of more than 5,000. If he really hit Herman with all his strength, Ron believed that the current Herman would become about form into a ball of meat sauce. The kind that can be used to make dumplings directly. God knows how hard Ron worked just to control his strength and not slap Herman to death. Of course, this is not just because Herman is an experienced player in his eyes, but also because of Herman's background. If you just had a bad relationship with Herman, or injured Herman, there would basically not be too serious a problem. The man behind Herman would not be able to openly use methods to deal with him. But if Herman is really killed, there will be no guarantee what will happen. After all, he is that guy's only son. That person's strength is not something he can deal with now. That is an existence at the same level as Agnes, one of the 4 pillars of the Eternal Freedom sect. What's more, this is a church. Ron is not so arrogant as to kill people randomly in the church. It's a pity that no one can understand Ron's kindness. Moreover, although he tried hard not to cause excessive physical harm to Herman, he seemed to have caused serious mental harm to Herman. I didn't even use any force, he fell down. For Herman, the lethality of these words was far more terrifying than the previous slap. The tall body was like a maggot crawling on the ground, vomiting blood from its mouth. This slap also brought Herman back from the previous loss of control. His face was full of pain, anger, unwillingness, and even despair. He doesn't understand. I was humiliated at the hands of Ron before. It can be said that I didn't understand Ron's strength and suffered a loss that was caught off guard. But now, he is obviously stronger than before, but why has his end become even worse? Could it be said that this is also a trial arranged by fate? Why is it so painful? The movement here has attracted the attention of many early rising priests, and pairs of eyes peered at Herman's embarrassed appearance. Every glance was like a sharp knife, torturing his soul. Herman still wanted to maintain his dignity and struggled to get up. At this moment, there were footsteps in front of him. The crisp sound frightened Herman. Even without raising his head, he knew who was coming. A cold voice penetrated his ears. "Herman, you pinched Aurelia's wrist, and I pinched you too. Is that fair?" Herman felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. His wrist had been caught by Ron, and his body could not stop shaking. He suddenly raised his head. "No, Ron, you can't." "I am." "Ah." Click. The sound of bones being crushed. The screams reached unprecedented limits. It was so shrill that it tore the sky apart. Herman's body rolled desperately on the ground, big beads of sweat rolling down his face. Every cleric who heard this voice felt their scalp numb and goosebumps all over their body. They looked at Ron as if they were looking at a devil. God, he actually crushed Herman's wrist. From the crunching sound, it could be heard that the bones of Herman's wrist had probably turned into dregs. So cruel. When did such a vicious character appear in the church? Goddess of Dawn, please forgive this thug. The screams lasted for an unknown amount of time and finally slowly stopped. Herman's rolling body also stopped. He was squirming on the ground, still holding his head stubbornly high, and the gasping sound in his throat was like a bellows. A pair of eyes stared at Ron, as if the nature of the beast was awakening at this moment. Herman's performance actually surprised Ron. He subconsciously glanced at Herman, and then his expression changed slightly. All I could see was that Herman's pupils had turned gray and black at this moment, and slender, spider-like traces could still be seen faintly, slowly moving in his pupils. Those were several extremely tiny insects. The mark is so shallow that you won't even notice it if you don't look carefully. But Ron's eyes became more solemn than ever before. He was too familiar with what this change meant, which was: the eggs are hatching. The black beast has arrived. Once the eggs begin to hatch, the host's body and will gradually begin to mutate. It won't take more than a month at most before he will completely transform into a black beast. This is also the origin of the name of the game, Goddess X Black Beast. Ron's eyes looked towards the golden giant city in the distant horizon. It was the Dusk Temple that brought the beast tide. Ron had not told Gerald before. On the one hand, in the game, the Black Beast officially appeared after the Dragon Clan was destroyed, so there was still enough time. Moreover, as a prophet, Ron must maintain the character of a prophet. Revealing too much content at once will lower the grade and mystery of the prophet. And if the content of the Black Beast is revealed, but no corresponding countermeasures can be taken to prevent the eggs from hatching, the prophet's qualifications will probably be lost, and his title may change from prophet to a liar. In the game, there is no detailed explanation of how the eggs are spread. By the time people react, the black beasts have begun to wreak havoc in the Dusk Continent. What is even more speechless is that it was not until the destruction of Larnaca City that the black beast really attracted the attention of the top leaders of the major races and kingdoms. As for the few people who were familiar with Ron and had a relatively good relationship with them, Aurelia, the heroine, was not parasitized by the young eggs. Gerald was not parasitized by the eggs, but eventually died fighting to prevent the young gods from hatching. Not to mention Virgil, this guy lived a long, long time. As for Ron himself, there is no death warning for Elsa, so there is basically no need to worry too much. In addition, as soon as he traveled to this world, too much had happened in a short period of time, and Ron had no time to think about the parasitism of young eggs. Unexpectedly, now I can see traces of the Black Beast's mutation on Herman. What surprised Ron the most was, in the game, Herman was not parasitized by the eggs. This guy was a shameful deserter. When the situation in Larnaca City became increasingly dangerous, other clergymen were trying to control the situation. Only Herman abandoned the city and fled back to the headquarters of the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Because of his father, not only did he not receive any punishment, he even raped many nuns at the headquarters. What went wrong that caused Herman to be parasitized by an egg? Ron frowned, his mind thinking rapidly. Jehehehe. Herman's hoarse voice came in front of him. The disabled Herman finally straightened up his upper body and looked at Ron with twisted eyes. Scarlet mucus continued to flow from his grinning mouth. Ron, you'd better kill me now. If you don't kill me, I will kill you, I promise. Ron judged that Herman, who had begun to transform into a black beast, was more dangerous than the person behind him. He exhaled softly, with a soft smile on his face. Your request will be fulfilled, Mr. Herman. Originally, Ron didn't plan to kill Herman so quickly. After all, this was a good experience package. But now, Ron has changed his mind. Herman, who was originally not worth mentioning, will increase in strength at an extremely fast rate after being parasitized by young eggs. Having experienced the disasters in the game, Ron knows the terror of the Black Beast better than anyone else. As long as Ron believes that the threat posed by leaving Herman alive is more terrifying than the punishment of the Dawn Goddess Church and the revenge of the people behind him, then Ron will kill Herman without hesitation. At the same time, a thought flashed through Ron's mind. Such a major change in Herman's fate meant that he had become a pawn in the world line. Like Partridge, grabbing the dark Bible with his right hand, although a casual fist should be able to blow Herman's head off, Ron was still prepared to use the power of knowledge to double the destruction to ensure that Herman would die cleanly. Without any hesitation, the dark Bible hit Herman on the head. Herman, who was originally stubborn, had wide eyes exuding strong fear. He just wanted to show off and gain respect. Like a group of hooligans, they would say a few harsh words even if they lost the fight. He wanted to pretend to be a man, even if he had lost face, he still wanted to maintain his poor dignity. After all, this is the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. No matter how arrogant the guy is, he would never dare to kill people at will here. However, he didn't expect that he would meet a real madman. Keep someone under your command. Seeing the dark Bible getting closer and closer to Herman's head, as if Herman was going to be smashed into pieces in the next second, a hoarse voice suddenly came from a distance. Ron's eyes narrowed slightly, and he knew who the owner of the voice was. However, the dark Bible still did not stop for a moment. On the contrary, Ron even increased his efforts, trying to kill Herman before the obstruction arrived. But at this moment, a gust of breeze blew Ron's long hair on his forehead. The very gentle wind contained a power that even Ron could not resist. His body tilted involuntarily and his steps were forced to stagger. Advanced wind magic, the breeze blows on your face. The dark Bible almost brushed against Herman's body and fell with a crash. Rumble. The moment the dark Bible hit the ground, the entire church backyard trembled. Immediately afterwards, Herman's body, which was very close at hand, was blown away, fluttering and tumbling in midair. After a long time, it hit the ground with a bang. There was a faint clicking sound, and it seemed that a few more bones were broken, probably the thigh bones. The pale bone stubble poked through the skin, and it was bloody and looked a bit oozing. The right arm was twisted in a weird way, almost turning into a stick, and all the bones inside were obviously broken. I don't know how many bones and dregs poked into the flesh and blood and into the internal organs. It might hurt a little. Herman opened his mouth desperately, but couldn't make a sound. He didn't even have the strength to squirm on the ground. His body felt like an electric shock, shaking and twitching from time to time. The open mouth kept spitting out blood foam mixed with internal organs fragments. In just a short moment, blood covered his body. All in all, it's a bit miserable. This injury would have killed others long ago, but the black beast larva parasitized by its young eggs have a vitality that can be called morbid, and this is a church, and the most indispensable thing is a priest. It's a pity. I can't kill Herman anymore. Ron sighed with regret. He was a little annoyed. The previous slap should have been harder to slap Herman to death. However, this annoyance only passed away in a flash. If Herman really became a pawn of fate, he would not be easily killed. Even if he tried his best, some kind of accident would definitely stop him. After shaking his head, Ron looked forward. "Brother Virgil, what are you doing?" It was Virgil who stopped Ron from killing Herman. In fact, Virgil has been here a long time ago. Virgil had been watching Herman being beaten before, and he had no intention of stopping it. He even watched it happily. He was the one who laughed the loudest. After all, Herman, because of his father, was looked down upon by no one and had offended many people. Even though Virgil was originally a cleric of the vice-pope faction, he didn't have the slightest fondness for this so-called young master. However, when Ron really wanted to kill Herman, Virgil couldn't sit idly by. As the current head of the branch, if Herman died, he would definitely not end well. When he walked up to Ron and glanced at the location where Herman had been, Virgil's heart skipped a beat. The place was now a large crater with a diameter of more than 2 meters and a depth of nearly 1 meter. The stone slabs on the ground were all reduced to fragments. Virgil's lips twitched slightly. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, who would have believed that this big hole was made by a book? Those who knew that Ron was a mage, and knew that Ron's profession in the church was a priest. Those who didn't know thought that he was a predator, and his strength was so exaggerated. Even he, a 7-star disaster expert, might not be able to withstand the impact of the dark Bible just now. Quietly wiping the cold sweat on his forehead, Virgil smiled bitterly. "Brother Ron, I would like to ask you, do you really want to kill someone in the church in front of everyone?" Virgil deliberately emphasized the words church and public view. He doesn't think his brother is that kind of idiot. Even if he really wants to kill someone, he would find a place that is private and not watched by so many people. Doesn't he even understand this? Ron shrugged. "The conscience of heaven and earth, he asked me to kill him. I have never heard such a strange request in my life. If you really kill Herman, you will be in trouble." Virgil rubbed his forehead bitterly. "Do you know what the oath Herman took to join the church is called?" "What?" Virgil spread his hands. "My father, the deputy pope." After a brief pause, Virgil breathed out again. "That's all, I will help you handle the matter here and suppress it as much as possible. I hope it won't cause too much trouble." For Virgil, the decision wasn't easy. Although in Ron's opinion, he was a cunning person, Ron was still somewhat touched that he could do this for him. "Excuse me, brother. By the way, Brother Virgil, if you still have time, please help me find my notebook. I may have lost it when I was kidnapped by the Eternal Freedom sect. The contents recorded in it are very important." Virgil's eyes narrowed slightly. Could it be related to prophecy? Ron's lips trembled slightly. It was really just an ordinary notebook. It might just record some of Ron's daily life. But Ron finally nodded heavily and said shamelessly, "That's right." Virgil looked solemn. "Ron's notebook, it may record the future of the world. It is of great importance, so we must find it as soon as possible." After explaining, Ron walked straight out of the backyard door. "Where are you going?" Virgil's voice came from behind. He was afraid that Ron would cause trouble again. "Library." Ron wanted to investigate about Archibald and Partridge. Although Cecilia has read books and knows some history, it is definitely not as detailed as what is recorded in history books. Especially for Archibald, Ron was very curious about what legacy this senior who traveled to the Twilight Continent thousands of years in advance of him had left to this world. He discovered something and finally became crazy. "Your Excellency, Bishop, please spare some time in the past few days. I have something very important to discuss with you," Ron said quietly as he glanced at the half-dead Herman again. Suddenly, a subtle smile appeared on his lips. "This seems to be a key to unlocking the transmission route of Black Beast eggs." The closing of the world line rewrote Herman's fate and caused Ron a lot of trouble that cannot be ignored, but it also left a loophole that might allow us to peek into his destiny. Glancing at Herman, who was like a puddle of rotten flesh on the ground, Aurelia showed some pity in her eyes. But that was all. Aurelia would never help Herman again. Just like she told Herman before, she would not do anything that might cause Ron to misunderstand. This is Aurelia. She takes her feelings very seriously, but when her feelings are transferred, she will be more determined than anyone else. After Herman said that the engagement was void, she had no relationship with Herman anymore. From now on and forever, there would only be one figure in her heart. Watching the two people leaving, Cecilia had some envy in her eyes. If she could get along with her lover like this day and night, she would definitely be very happy, right? Thinking of Malta, a slight smile appeared on Cecilia's face. Soon, the kind Mr. Ron gave her 10 gold coins. This is a huge sum of money, plus the money she had previously deposited with Malta. It should be enough for her to redeem herself from the church. After the evil star left, Virgil let out a long breath and waved to call 2 priests to treat Herman. Although Herman's injuries looked very bad, death was unlikely after all. This is the church of the Dawn Goddess. As long as you still have breath, it will probably be able to bring you back. Everything Virgil did was carefully thought out. He stopped Ron from killing Herman, but he would not offend Ron. He also helped Ron to minimize the impact of this incident, which was enough to gain Ron's gratitude. After all, Herman's father was Vicar General. At the same time, although Herman was seriously injured, he would not be blamed by the Vice Pope. After all, he was the one who rescued Herman from Ron, and the Vice Pope might even give him some benefits. Now this result is just right. Get out of the backyard. The large group of clergymen who were originally crowded at the back door suddenly dispersed. After all, for the Church of the Dawn Goddess, which advocates mercy and kindness, it is rare to see such a violent guy as Ron. Some priests who knew Herman's identity looked at Ron with either pity or gloating. The Vice Pope is extremely powerful in the church. Even the Pope must show courtesy when facing the Vice Pope. Ron, a newcomer, had just joined the church and beat the Vice Pope's illegitimate son half to death. Given the Vice Pope's protective character, the end could not be described as tragic. Ron didn't pay attention to the movements coming from around him. He glanced at Aurelia beside him, and a trace of impulse flashed in his eyes. Aurelia's charm was growing almost every moment. Every time I see Aurelia, she becomes more attractive than before. Aren't you angry? Why am I angry? Aurelia raised her eyebrows and spoke calmly. Ron felt a slight lurch in his heart, feeling that something was wrong. After a brief pause, Aurelia clasped her little hands behind her back in a cute girlish gesture, and murmured on her lips. Actually, I'm still a little jealous. But what I said will not change. I don't care how many women you have, as long as you always have a place for me in your heart. What's more, you haven't really done anything. Such a gentle woman. Ron was a little touched in his heart. Aurelia glanced at Ron quietly, her cheeks were slightly red, and after a while, she whispered. In the future, if you are really feeling uncomfortable, you can come to me. Ha ha. Ron's throat squirmed, a fire burst out of thin air in his chest, and his eyes swept over Aurelia. The close-fitting nun's uniform has a hot collarbone and delicate white under the elegant and slender neck. Under the slender waist, the nun's uniform highlights the round curves of the buttocks. The outline of the slender legs makes people think about it. She is wearing white garters. Little feet hidden in black boots. The chest, waist, hips, legs, feet, all exude seductive temptation. Aurelia felt Ron's gaze, and her little ears trembled. Why, no, don't you like it? Very much. Ron followed his heart and answered honestly. He was a little surprised. Why would a pure nun become a lustful nun? What exactly went wrong? Is Aurelia's character too different from the one in the game? Aurelia also smiled softly. Although she was shy, Ron's answer also made her very happy. The little nun took a long breath. She seemed to remember something and said in a confused manner, Ron, you are very gentle, but this may not be a good thing for her. Ron knew who Aurelia was referring to. Why do you say that? It seems you really don't know everything. ... Is it because of her boyfriend? You know her boyfriend even though you don't know the reason. What you know is really strange. Aurelia glanced at Ron in surprise and said quietly, actually, no matter whether you have any feelings for Cicely or not, no matter what you do, the best outcome for her is for you to keep her by your side. The most precious and valuable time for a serving nun is when she has never served a guest. There was some sadness in her eyes, even though she was not a serving nun, and she hated the presence of such filth in a holy church. But Aurelia knew better that if they did not become serving nuns, most of these girls would die of hunger, cold, and disease at a very young age. Almost all serving nuns were homeless orphans. The value of a serving nun diminishes significantly once she has served guests. And once the first customer doesn't keep her with him, then soon, she will be assigned to the next customer. Not every guest is as gentle as you. This is Cecilia's fate. Ron stopped. He had no feelings for Cecilia. Although she was a very good nun in terms of figure and appearance, at most she felt a little pity for Cecilia's tragic ending. But there are so many miserable people in this world. Could it be that Ron can still save them all? He is not that great. However, Cecilia is an exception. He learned about Archibald and Partridge from Cecilia's mouth. Although this is not a secret, as long as Ron lives in this world long enough, he will be exposed to these sooner or later. But even so, Ron was still grateful to Cecilia. In Ron's eyes, this was Cecilia's kindness to him. With this kind of kindness, Ron would not just sit idly by. Taking a deep breath, Ron immediately turned around. At this moment, a figure walked over behind him. Unexpectedly, the two of them bumped into each other with a bang. It was an old priest. The pile of books held in his hands all fell to the ground. Sorry. Ron apologized quickly and helped the old man up. The old man seemed to have white beard and hair, a square face, and kind eyes. Although he was wearing the clothes of an ordinary priest, he seemed to be quite qualified. Even Aurelia stood up straight subconsciously. Father Abraham. The priest was not angry because he was hit. He looked at Ron with a kind smile on his face. You are Ron. The priest's smile was very gentle, making people feel like they were having a spring breeze. Ron's brows frowned slightly, and he turned his head desperately. Larnaca City, the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, can be said to be the equivalent of a novice village in the game. For a long time in the early stages of the game, players could only move around Larnaca City. Ron didn't dare to know every NPC in the church, but at least he had an impression that would never be forgotten. However, in Ron's memory, Father Abraham did not exist at all. No matter how Ron searched for his memory, nothing, not at all. Be it his name or his appearance. It's like an extra existence suddenly appeared. Maybe I just missed it. Several thoughts quickly flashed through his mind, but they were not expressed on his face at all. Ron still had a gentle smile on his face. Sorry, Father, did I hurt you? Father Abraham waved his hand casually. Old man, I am not that fragile. You are a good boy, much more polite than that guy Herman. When that guy saw the old man, his nostrils were almost pierced to the sky. He patted Ron on the shoulder, and suddenly said in a somewhat treacherous tone, You beat that idiot, very good, I like it very much. What kind of evil did this guy Herman do to get to the point where he hates people and hates dogs? Father Abraham looked at Aurelia next to him again. It's much better for this girl to follow you than to follow Herman. Treat her well. Aurelia's face immediately turned red. In the church, news spreads very quickly. I heard them say that you are a prophet. Father Abraham's cloudy eyes kept staring at Ron, and before Ron could answer, he immediately asked curiously, Then it is also fate that you and I will collide here. Quote. Ron smiled. The prophet doesn't know everything. What the prophet sees is only a hazy future. Crouching down, Ron helped the old priest pick up the fallen books. Occultism, astrology. After putting away the book, the old priest hunched over and left. Ron's eyes swept over the old priest's back and asked seemingly casually, This priest is? The oldest priest in Moral Church is said to have been working here for more than 60 years. Even Archbishop Gerald and Bishop Virgil were baptized by Father Abraham. Aurelia explained beside her. He has long been qualified to enter the headquarters and serve as a bishop or even an archbishop. However, he has a deep affection for Moral Cathedral. He has always refused to be transferred, and he does not want to serve as archbishop or bishop. He always leaves opportunities to young people. Currently, he is only taking care of the church garden as an ordinary priest. All in all, this is a highly respected person. Ron squinted his eyes and glanced at Father Abraham twice before retracting his gaze and returning to the backyard. Sister Cecilia has left. Ron warned Virgil that he didn't want Cecilia to accompany other guests anymore. Virgil glanced at Ron with some ambiguity, and at the same time he was a little envious. There was no doubt that this was with Aurelia's consent. This brother's methods are not simple. Even a beautiful and proud girl like Aurelia can handle this and is willing to share her lover with other nuns. When will I be able to reach this level? After bidding farewell to Virgil again, Ron came to the church library under the guidance of Aurelia. Ron is also familiar here. There are several small tasks in the game, but the rewards are very average, and Ron is not very interested. Now he has to pretend to be a newbie. The library covers a large area, with a round dome, milky white color, and a statue of a holy goddess at the door. This was the fourth largest library in the entire Granville Kingdom, with a very rich collection of books. Unfortunately, it was later destroyed in the Sea of Aaa fire with the destruction of Larnaca City. Ron looked for some historical documents. He wanted to have a general understanding of the world as a whole. Aurelia seemed to regard her as her other half. She was not very interested in history, but instead found some magic books that nuns could learn from. Aurelia also has her own pride. She wants to always be by Ron's side and become Ron's assistant, not a beautiful vase. Even if it only has a little effect, it's fine, but what troubles Aurelia is that it takes a long time for her to study the healing techniques that ordinary nuns can easily learn. Not to mention offensive magic. So far, there is only one kind of offensive magic mastered, and that is Arrow of Dawn. It sounds powerful, but in fact it is just the lowest level magic similar to water arrows and fireballs. Sometimes, Aurelia even wonders, with her talent, maybe she should be thrown into the backyard and become a serving nun compared to Sister Cecilia, right? Seeing Aurelia's troubled look, Ron let out a breath and said, "Aurelia, maybe you can study chant magic." Aurelia is a little surprised. Chant magic is the most difficult magic in the church. Psalm magic is extremely complicated, the spells are lengthy, and the demand for magic power is exaggerated. Only priests with a very high level of magical attainments will delve into it. Aurelia has never dabbled in chant magic before. For Aurelia, who can't even use healing spells and arrows of dawn, this is a waste of time. She doesn't understand why Ron would propose such a thing. Suggestion. Believe me, Aurelia, maybe you will be very talented in chanting magic. Ron smiled. Ron's smile and voice seemed to bring courage to Aurelia. She bit her lip gently with her white teeth, and she changed to a magical book of Psalms, Where the Dawn Shines. Where the Dawn Shines. Introductory chant, which can eliminate the fear of friendly units in a large area around it, increase the physical recovery of all friendly units by 10%, and increase the magic power recovery by 10%. The coverage area is based on the user's own magic power. Benchmark, theoretically unlimited. Ron never regarded Aurelia as a vase. Although she was only a character in the early stages of the game, even at the end of the game, Aurelia still firmly occupied a position in the team. Aurelia does not have a super strong defense that can attract the boss's firepower. She does not have a powerful magic that can produce a series of output. She does not have an amazing healing ability that can pull back the bloodline of a person who is on the verge of death. However, Aurelia also has a role that cannot be replaced by other characters. What Aurelia is best at is large-scale chanting, which can provide powerful buffs to all friendly units within a large area. For example, the attack of all team members is increased by 50%, the critical hit of all team members is increased by 25%, the critical damage is increased by 50%, the speed of all team members is increased by 30%, etc. She is the undisputed number one support in the game. Moreover, this is still under the condition that the number of players in the game is limited. In fact, according to the description, there is no limit on the number of chants mastered by Aurelia. As long as they are within the range, all can be added. Go to buff. She alone is as good as an army. Later, I will get some magic increasing equipment for Aurelia. Maybe a halo can cover the entire city. If this kind of existence is a vase, it is definitely the most terrifying vase. Ron stayed in librarianship for 3 days. He had a rough understanding of every stage of the history of the Twilight Continent. The Twilight Dynasty, which once controlled the entire world, caused resistance from all major races due to its brutal rule, and was eventually destroyed. During the resistance, the Dragon Clan, which contributed the most strength, became new ruler. These contents are almost the same as the background plot in the game. However, Ron felt a subtle distortion. The records of this period of history in different history books seemed to be copied from the same paragraph of text. There was almost no difference, even in the miscellaneous records of unofficial history. As for Archibald and Partridge, there is not much difference from what Cecilia said. Only in a hidden corner, Partridge's surname was mentioned. The repairman repairs the world line and returns the world line to normal. Although a long time had passed, Elsa's reminder voice still sounded in Ron's mind from time to time. Originally, Ron didn't take this reminder very seriously, but Archibald's death brought him a strong stimulus. He had more knowledge, more talent and strength than himself, but he still died in the end, maybe just because he had deviated from the trajectory of his fate. Ron felt real fear for the first time. Everyone is a time traveler, he is no better than Archibald. Ron sat upright in the chair, gently stroking the books in front of him with his fingers. Various threads kept emerging and entangled in his mind. He tried to sort out the information, but it was not easy. Work. He cleared his mind and started thinking from scratch. If the world line is closed, how to return the world line to normal? When the world line returns to normal, it will never completely turn into what was originally designed. After all, what has happened cannot be changed. This is confirmed by the fact that Partridge replaced Archibald. The so-called converging world line should just allow the direction of the world to generally follow its original trajectory. Everyone can change. Archibald can be replaced by Partridge, Herman can become parasitized by young eggs, Ron can survive briefly, Cecilia may not have to become a bloody nun, but she definitely won't. What has changed is the protagonist. In other words, even if the world line is closed, Aurelia will eventually step into the position of the White Saint, and her bloodline must be awakened. So, how to awaken? In the game, Aurelia collapsed into despair under strong stimulation, and then she gradually awakened. The strong stimulation may not only be violated, humiliated, or assassinated, but may also cause Aurelia's strong stimulation, collapse, and despair in other aspects. For example, the person you love deeply dies. The person you love deeply dies. A gust of cold air rushed from the soles of his feet to his forehead, and a dense layer of small pimples appeared on the skin all over his body. Ron's eyes drifted to Aurelia, who was studying the chance opposite. Aurelia, who was concentrating, was even more attractive. Her body seemed to be covered with a layer of crystal white light, as if the goddess had descended into the world. Temptation disappears, but holiness remains. Feeling the sight, Aurelia raised her head and glanced at Ron, her cheeks a little shy. Ron's throat moved slightly, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and lowered his head again. Aurelia, who was opposite, saw Ron's appearance and was thoughtful. Just when Ron was about to continue thinking along this line, he suddenly felt a rustling movement. Hiss. Immediately afterwards, he gasped suddenly and leaned back subconsciously. At the same time, his eyes instinctively looked around. Ron breathed a sigh of relief. It was already late at night. In the entire library, apart from Ron and Aurelia, there was only one administrator sitting at the counter, lying on the table and sleeping lazily. He stared at the administrator twice more, and after making sure that the administrator would not wake up, he looked away and looked under the table in front of him. Aurelia, who was originally sitting opposite, had slipped under the table at some point. The long silver hair is rippling gently with the movement of the head. Aurelia, what did you? Ron exhaled heavily. He had to use all his strength to endure the waves of stimulation that washed over his soul like a tsunami. You couldn't help it, didn't you want it? Aurelia stopped temporarily, glanced at Ron charmingly, and murmured in a low voice. Her pretty face was burning, and her heart was agitated. Even Aurelia could not imagine that she would do such a bold thing in the church library. However, as long as it is for Ron, Aurelia is willing to do anything. She can see that Ron's shoulders bear an unimaginable weight. Maybe she can't share it, but she can make Ron get enough. Release and rest. On the other side, the sense of rebellious blasphemy made Aurelia both fearful and excited. She felt that she seemed to be becoming more and more wild. But this kind of dissoluteness would only be shown in front of Ron. As for Ron, the expression on his face was even more innocent. When did he say he couldn't help it anymore? He just glanced at Aurelia, and then swallowed because of the fear in his heart. Could it be that just because of this swallowing of saliva, Aurelia thought she couldn't help it? For a moment, Ron's forehead was covered with black lines. What is going on in this woman's mind that leads to this wrong perception? While he was trying to stay rational in the cracks, he wanted to stop Aurelia from continuing, but he really couldn't bear it in his heart. He was immersed in the dilemma, and it was really uncomfortable. He was shaking all over from the discomfort. His fingers caressed Aurelia's silky silver hair, and he couldn't help but wonder, where did Aurelia learn this? While you were staying in the library, I left for a while. Seemingly sensing Ron's doubts, Aurelia muttered vaguely, "I went to find Sister Cecilia. I learned it from my sister." Aurelia glanced at Ron charmingly and lowered her head again. In the huge library, the expression on Ron's face changed from time to time. His consciousness seemed to float to the clouds, his thoughts were divergent as never before, and all kinds of messy thoughts came to his mind at this moment. "I don't know what that guy Herman is doing now. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Herman for 3 days and I miss him so much. Without seeing Herman, I always feel that there is a lot of fun missing in life." Aurelia's favorability towards him didn't seem to have improved much. Gold medal assistance is indeed indispensable. On the other hand, Herman's situation is quite delicate. With the best pastor in the church, it would be difficult for Herman to die even if he wanted to. For 3 days, Herman never entered the church and hid in his room. From time to time, in the house with the doors and windows closed, screams like wounded beasts could be heard. The smell of blood filled the room, and traces of scarlet were stuck to the quilts and sheets everywhere. The clothes on Herman's body were torn apart one by his sharp claws. Even the skin on the chest and back was covered with hideous cracks, and blood gurgled out. It was as if Herman was trying to dig something out of his body. I don't know how much time passed, but Herman, who had been in a state of madness, finally calmed down. He looked silently at the table, where there was a portrait of Aurelia. A crazy smile gradually appeared on the twisted face covered with blood. "Aurelia, you are mine." His consciousness was in incomprehensible confusion. He wanted to kill Aurelia with his own hands. But he desperately longs for Aurelia. Is this what Virgil calls a weekend break? Sure enough, he didn't hate this kind of rest. Ron's body trembled, and his brain entered an unprecedented ethereal state. In the game, Aurelia began to collapse because of Herman's abandonment, and because of the destruction of Larnaca City. She saw too much pain and death, but she was unable to save her and her spirit was on the verge of reaching its limit. In the end, he was caught by the surviving clergy and announced that it was Aurelia's infidelity, which provoked punishment from the goddess, completely pushing Aurelia into despair. Although the world line is changing now, the general direction will not be too abnormal. Perhaps, it was because of the closure of the world line that his relationship with Aurelia had developed rapidly in this short period of time. Was Herman's assist just a pawn that had been arranged by the world line? And he would not take the initiative to do anything to hurt Aurelia. He didn't have anything happen to Cecilia, and even if something did happen, Aurelia said she didn't care. So, perhaps only his death can push Aurelia into despair and activate Aurelia's bloodline. The more Aurelia favors him, the closer he is to death. Then, the time when he is most likely to die should be when the city of Larnaca is destroyed. And the butcher knife used to kill him may be Herman, who has completely transformed into a black beast. Ron died, Larnaca City was destroyed, and it was devastated and bloody. No matter how firm Aurelia's will was, it would definitely collapse. In this way, the world line that was once reversed will return to its original track. Deducing the time of his death, it was obviously a very dangerous and terrible thing, but instead of being afraid, Ron was even a little excited. He caught the tail of fate. Having to fight against fate, this feeling is really exciting. As for how to break the situation, Ron already has some ideas in his mind. He could choose to leave Larnaca City, but it shouldn't be that smooth. Perhaps we can investigate from Herman, investigate where Herman has been and what he has come into contact with in the past 2 days, find out the source of the parasitism of the young eggs, and prevent the spread of the black beast from the source. It is even possible to find out who is behind all this behind Herman. The well-behaved and docile Aurelia has helped Ron organize everything and finally got out. The little face is bulging. She looked around, but didn't find a suitable place. This library was very unqualified. There was no trash can or anything like that. Helplessly, the slender neck squirmed slightly. Ron's spirit trembled slightly, and the slight fatigue and confusion disappeared completely in an instant. This action of Aurelia is really too lethal, especially considering the identity of Sister Aurelia, and even the future White Saint. The instant stimulation made Ron's whole body feel hot. Realizing that Ron was staring at her, Aurelia gave Ron a charming look, and then a layer of red clouds appeared on her pretty face. She wanted to pry open her little head to see what was inside. This is a church. Aurelia was filled with annoyance at the thought of once again blaspheming the goddess, and then glared at Ron again. Ron was speechless. It was obviously you who took the initiative, why is it now our fault? Is it so unreasonable? Of course, Ron knew very well that trying to reason with a woman was the absolute stupidest thing to do. How do you feel now? After a while, Aurelia finally seemed to have recovered a little, and then she asked. Ron smiled softly. Thanks to you, I can see a lot of things clearly. After a brief pause, Ron stood up. Let's go, there's no need to stay in the library anymore. Where to go? Aurelia asked casually. Just open your mouth and you can smell Ron. Although she didn't hate it, she still had to go back and brush her teeth early. Otherwise, it would be very embarrassing if other nuns noticed it. Let's go to your place. Ron stretched hard. That guy Virgil said that the church's room is a bit tight right now, and he hasn't arranged a place for me yet. Ron's eyes swept over Aurelia's slim figure. The slightly tight nun's uniform highlighted her flat belly and the attractive outline of her legs. The night is still long. The blush spread quickly on his face, and his little ears were trembling. Of course Aurelia understood what Ron meant. She didn't answer and just walked silently outside the library. As soon as she returned to Aurelia's room, the holy nun immediately felt a hot breath coming from her back, and her slender waist had fallen into the man's arms. The amber eyes suddenly became a little confused. She had no resistance to Ron's contact. The next day. The sun shone on her face through the curtains, and Aurelia opened her eyes drowsily. The amber eyes were still a little confused. After a few seconds, they finally woke up. Looking at the mess on the bed, their little face turned slightly red. The madness last night is still vivid in my mind. She carefully climbed up from Ron's arms, trying not to wake the man. Even though she was wearing a nun's uniform, her body was still chilly. Looking down, Aurelia exhaled helplessly. The nun's uniform and pure white stockings were already in tatters. What is this guy's hobby? Is her lover some kind of beast? It was like a pure animal, always wanting to leave his mark and his scent on every place on her body. Like declaring ownership. Every time she had fun with Ron, her clothes would always get torn a lot, but this fool didn't allow her to take off her nun uniform. Sooner or later he will be punished by the goddess, he will definitely. It always felt like her expenses had increased a lot out of thin air since Ron appeared. After all, stockings are really not cheap. Slender fingers gently caressed Ron's cheek, and Aurelia smiled foolishly. Although she is simple, she is not stupid. She could feel that the relationship between herself and Ron was too abnormal. As the time I spent in contact with Ron became longer and longer, I fell deeper and deeper into Ron, and the number of in-depth exchanges increased. This feeling became stronger and stronger. It was a very obvious distortion. It was as if there was some kind of force that kept pushing him from behind to get closer to Ron and fall in love with Ron. But, so what? Aurelia is not annoyed by this kind of obsession, she is even filled with happiness. No matter whether it is twisted or just let nature take its course, Aurelia doesn't care. All she knew was that she loved this man deeply. Only this will never change. Ron's fascination with her body gave Aurelia a strong sense of satisfaction. She hoped that this happiness could last forever, forever. At this moment, Aurelia noticed some slight movements under her body. She looked down and met Ron's dark eyes. Are you awake? Woke up. What are you going to do today? Are you going to the library? No, let's go to the city for a walk. I'm going to buy some equipment. Ron said softly. Now that he has caught the tail of fate, then, in Ron's mind, there is still the simplest way to break the situation. That is, becoming stronger. If it is destined that he can only be a little villain who is bound to die, then, he, a little villain, will also turn his fate upside down. Aurelia helped Ron tidy up docilely and well-behavedly. She didn't hate this feeling, it felt like home. After helping Ron tidy up, Aurelia stood up lazily, washed up, and prepared to change into a set of clothes. Although she kept complaining about Ron's rudeness, Aurelia finally took out a new pair of stockings and put them on. This time they were thigh stockings. She felt a little helpless. Could it be that she really wanted to try all the stockings? After washing, I opened the door, and the midday sun shone on my face, which even felt a bit dazzling. There were other nuns living in the next room. When they saw Ron, Their cheeks were slightly red and their eyes were silky. They seemed to be ashamed, but their slightly weird eyes still glanced at Ron's body from time to time. That was completely it's not like looking at a human being, it's like looking at a ferocious dragon. The Church of the Goddess of Dawn does not prohibit marriage. There are also couples living in the church, and these nuns will occasionally hear some different sounds. But it has never been so exaggerated. 2/3 of the whole night was spent in trouble. Isn't he tired? I really don't know what it feels like. No wonder Aurelia would abandon Herman and choose Ron. If she were replaced, she would probably make the same choice. Ron was thick-skinned and didn't care about those surprised looks, and even thought they were compliments to himself. But Aurelia was obviously not as thick-skinned as Ron. She couldn't bear the looks from other nuns. Her cheeks turned red. She couldn't help letting out a nice scream, grabbed Ron's wrist, and rushed outside the church. Until she was far away from the church and it was absolutely impossible for any cleric to see her, Aurelia finally stopped, but her pink lips were still complaining about Ron's beastly behavior. This time, I don't have the face to see people in church. Ron just listened and said nothing. He is smart enough to know that whatever he says now may be the trigger for Aurelia to explode. He never thought Aurelia was nagging, so he would do it next time anyway. Looking at the girl accompanying him, I felt a little warm in my heart. Unconsciously, the corners of his mouth curled up in an arc. "Why are you laughing?" Aurelia asked angrily after noticing the expression on Ron's face. "It's nothing, I just feel, you are beautiful." Ron shrugged and replied. Aurelia's heart trembled slightly, a red cloud floated on her face, her little ears trembled, her eyes wandered and blurred. "Humph, don't think that you can get away with just saying a few nice words. Do you know how embarrassed am I in front of my sisters this time? They will definitely laugh at me. In short, we must exercise restraint in the future and never do this again." Even so, Aurelia didn't notice it, and a smile quietly appeared on her face. The sun is getting brighter and warmer, and the appearance of the temple at dusk does not seem to have much impact on the city of Larnaca. The streets of Praia are still bustling with people. Under the high temperature, the air becomes more disgusting. Garbage piles, leftovers, sewage, and the corpses of dead cats, dogs, and rats are rapidly decaying under the sun, releasing a filthy smell. Although Praia City is the commercial district of Larnaca City, the environment is not much better than Bruno Street, or even worse. Because, here lives the largest number of people seeking life in the entire Larnaca City. Perhaps only the upper-class aristocratic areas can enjoy true peace and freshness. A flavor fried fish, a delicious flavor fried fish. A fried cakes, freshly baked fried cakes. Braised chicken feet. Potatoes, freshly dug potatoes. The cries of small vendors came and went, greeting the customers who were in a hurry. I don't know why, but the normal hawking sounds always make Ron feel strange. He was indeed a little hungry. After all, he had worked hard for most of the night last night and was still very physically exhausted. Ron bought 2 freshly baked baguettes and handed one to Aurelia. To be honest, the taste is not very good. I always feel that this thing can be used as a steel pipe to hit people. "Aurelia, do you want to go out to the city for a visit?" Ron asked abruptly. Aurelia was slightly startled. "Do you want to go out and relax?" "Of course you can." Oh, the two of them had just moved 2 steps when a scream suddenly came from the side. It was a businessman with a slightly monkey-like face, which seemed to show his shrewdness. He had a mustache and a mustache. He said with a trembling voice, "Goddess above, I can't get out of the city. Now I'm completely ruined." Ron, who had just started walking, suddenly stopped. He turned to the businessman and made an impeccable and perfect courtesy. "Sir, I just heard you say that you can't tell the city. Can you tell me what happened?" The businessman was in a depressed mood, and after hearing this, he wanted to drive Ron away, not to disturb his sadness alone. However, when he saw the clothes on Ron and Aurelia, he finally put the words on his lips back. Ron now puts on a pure white priest's robe, looking like a cleric. The priests of the Dawn Goddess Church were not something that a small businessman like him could afford to offend. The businessman let out a sigh of relief, and then explained, "I heard that it was the fault of that thing." The businessman glanced at the dusk temple hanging high in the sky. Many monsters have become extremely active inexplicably. They come out of the mountains, forests and caves and attack humans crazily. I heard that many people have been eaten. In order to prevent monsters from breaking into the city, under the coordination of the city lord, the Magic Association gathered the power of all magicians and imposed a huge barrier on Larnaca City. Now the entire city is blocked, and no one can enter or leave. All the fruits I purchased are going to rot in my hands, woo-woo-woo. Ron raised his head and looked above his head. It was hard to spot it without looking carefully before, but now that the businessman reminded me, I could see that just a few hundred meters above my head, the sunlight was slightly distorted. It was as if there was a huge, translucent dome that enveloped and blocked the entire city. The corners of Ron's mouth curved slightly. You see, it's such a coincidence. When I was about to leave the city was blocked. The city was blocked. Unless Ron had the ability to break the blockade jointly arranged by all the magicians in Larnaca City, he would not be able to leave. Obviously, he did not. This was such a coincidence that Ron was not surprised at all. He just spread his hands casually. Aurelia, it seems we can't go outside the city. I originally thought of having a quiet date somewhere with no people around. Aurelia's pretty face is slightly red. A date. She likes it too. But, is it really a date? From what she knew about Ron probably just wanted to experience what it was like to be in the wild. The images that appeared in her little head made Aurelia's face turn redder and redder, like a crystal clear apple. What exactly is the problem, and why can't I control all these messy things in my mind when I'm around Ron? I really can't go on like this, I'm going crazy. What's wrong with you? Ron noticed Aurelia's abnormality and asked. No, it's nothing. Aurelia's little head shook like a rattle. Didn't you say you wanted to buy a handy weapon? Let's go right now. I know there is a weapons store in Praia City. Very good. Aurelia didn't even dare to look into Ron's eyes and hurried forward. Ron was a little strange, but he was smart enough not to guess the woman's thoughts and just followed Aurelia. The weapons store that Aurelia said was very good was not too far from the church. If you walked, it would appear in front of you in less than half an hour. This place is relatively closer to the aristocratic area, and the environment is much better than other places. Otis Weapons Shop. After taking a look at the sign, Ron smiled knowingly, a simple and clear name. Otis. An arrogant and somewhat cute little old man. In the game, players can learn blacksmithing from Otis. In the early days, if you can get a weapon forged by Otis himself, it will be of great help in opening up Wasteland. However, the weapons made by Otis are often very expensive, and you can't afford them without paying money. However, there is no other way. This little old man has a proud personality and likes to be praised by others. He especially likes others to compare him with dwarf craftsmen and conclude that he is better than dwarf craftsmen. Being photographed feels comfortable. Otis can reduce the price of the weapon to a very low level, even if it is given away for free. When the city of Larnaca encountered a disaster, the money-grubbing Otis donated all the weapons in the shop to the frontline soldiers, and was eventually buried in the city of Larnaca where he had worked hard all his life. With some memories of Otis flashing through his mind, Ron entered the weapon shop under the guidance of Aurelia. What you see are shelves filled with all kinds of weapons, including staffs, swords, spears, swords, axes, and powerful bows. Under the sunlight, the sharp blade flashed with dazzling light. There are not many guests in the hall. After all, the weapons here are expensive and not just any adventurer can afford them. Ron's original profession was a magician. The church's auxiliary profession was a priest. In fact, Ron felt that the profession of priest suited him very well. After all, the difference between a magician and a priest was not that big. They were both of the legal system. Moreover, the pastor's job is to heal and enlighten believers, and he is very good at enlightening people. Since he was a priest, he naturally had to choose a weapon suitable for a priest. Ron looked towards the magic book and staff. A staff member also came forward very promptly. Praise to the goddess of dawn. You too, what weapons do you want? This is a short, fat man with a gentle face and a smile. Morimo, the clerk in the Otis weapon shop that players hate the most. An ordinary weapon can be blown away by this guy. It seems that if you don't buy this weapon, you will live a failed life. And the price he gave was often 10 times the normal transaction price. That's right, 10 times. This was a conclusion reached after being confirmed by countless players. Primo's message flashed through his mind quickly, and the smile on Ron's face remained unchanged. Wand, or magic book? He pointed at the items on the shelf. Don't fool me with these things. Molimo's eyes, which were crowded into slits by his fat facial muscles, suddenly shined brightly. It seemed that this was a big customer. Although most of the weapons on the shelves are ordinary white, there are also a few blue and high-quality equipment, but they are all looked down upon. Looking at this man, he is so young and accompanied by a beautiful nun. This is probably a rich young man who brought a woman to show off. Such a person equals Casey. If he couldn't scrape off a layer of flesh from his body, he would read the words, Molimo, backwards. The smile on Morlimo's face became even stronger. The Otis Weapon Shop has many excellent purple staffs and magic books. I wonder if, sir, do you have any special requirements? For example, what type of additional attributes are needed? We have ones that increase magic power, increase the speed of magic release, and increase the speed of magic recovery. They are all top-notch. Faced with Morlimo's inquiry, Ron thought for a while and said, it needs to be heavier and harder. It's better to be able to blow someone's head off at once. Cruncha. The smile on Morlimo's face faltered. He has been working here for more than 10 years, and has handled not only 1,000 but also 800 magic weapons. This is the first time he has encountered such a strange request. Those legal professions either require lightness, elegance, or excellent additional attributes. This is the first time I have encountered someone who is demanding, tough, and capable of knocking someone else's head off. Please, Master, you are from the legal system. Are you still planning to fight with others with a staff? How could Master Fa be so outrageous? He rubbed his ears vigorously, then looked at Ron again. Are you sure? Of course, no. Oh no, yes. Otis Weapons Store can meet all your requirements. Morlimo regained his gold medal sales temperament. No matter how outrageous the customer's requirements are, all he has to do is to satisfy them as much as possible. Mortimer turned and left. At this moment, Ron's ears suddenly heard Elsa's familiar voice that he had not heard for a long time. Beep. The system prompts that the infinite death system is enabled. Mission background. Hermana's hatred for you will never go away. He wants to kill you, but he has become smarter. Since he can't kill you, why can't he use other powers? With a deputy Pope Dad, there is no shortage of masters at his side. Please be careful, you may have to face at least 3 powerful enemies. Mission goal. Survive. That is your old friend, please entertain him with all your heart. Task reward. For every killer you kill, you can get 10 consecutive lottery tickets won. If you kill all the killers, you can get an additional 10 consecutive lottery tickets won. Death countdown. 1,800 seconds. The goddess of dawn is here, and the gold medal assistant Herman finally appears. I miss him so much. It had been 3 days since he had seen Herman. Herman had no idea how much Ron missed him in his heart. Although Herman's ex-fiancée copywriter Aurelia was by his side, it didn't seem so difficult, but no one could make up for the loneliness of Herman's absence. It was so touching that he thought Herman had unconscionably forgotten his old friend. Look, a gold medal assist is a gold medal assist, and he got 40 draws in a row. In his heart, Ron had already sent his most sincere thanks to Mr. Herman. I really want to try if I can kill him under the interference of fate this time. Ah, sneeze. Opposite the Otis Weapons Store was a restaurant. Standing at the window, Herman suddenly sneezed. His injuries have been completely healed. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, you would have even doubted that the half-dead man before was really Herman. His mental state seemed to be much better than before, at least he was no longer so crazy. His right hand moved back and forth quickly. Don't get me wrong, he didn't do anything bad. He just held a file and kept rubbing the nails on his left hand. There were some strange changes in his body. His fingernails grew very fast, and they could grow to 7 or 8 centimeters in one night. The length is as curved as a hook and sharp as a knife. He could only keep cutting and grinding his nails. The golden eyes have turned into a dark red color, and there are countless small things squirming deep in the pupils. Staring at the 2 figures opposite him, he could see the charm and temptation blooming on Aurelia's face. There was no doubt that during the 3 days he suffered, Aurelia and Ron's life can only be described as chaotic, and I guess I have tried many positions. Ah, Aurelia looks even more attractive than before. It was obviously a beauty that only he could enjoy, but now it was all at an advantage to Ron. As soon as he thought of this, the murderous intention in Herman's chest became stronger than ever before. However, Herman showed incredible calmness at this moment. He seemed to have grown a lot in just 3 days. No matter how strong the murderous intention was in his chest, he had no intention of taking action directly. He even lamented his previous stupidity. Why did he have to do it himself to deal with a mere Ron? Herman looked to the side. Just beside him, 3 figures stood impressively. A sturdy man with a strong build, a suit of stainless steel armor, and a scar on his face. This guy's arms are thicker than the average person's thighs, and his whole body is covered with muscles that look like poured steel. He looks a bit naive. Yes, but the axe on his shoulder chopped the bones of many people into pieces. Bloodaxe Simon, a petite, slender girl whose curves are smoother than the floor, unable to be highlighted by her close-fitting leather armor. Her narrow cheeks also seem a little childish, like an underage girl, but anyone who dares to look down on her will pay the heaviest price. Boning knife Maddie. What she likes to do most is to use the short knife in her hand to peel off the fascia and flesh and blood from the victim one by one, and enjoy the pleasure of blood splattering all over the body. She was Simon's wife. Herman admitted that Maddie tasted really good. While enjoying Maddie, Herman felt as if he understood Ron. Other people's women always felt more delicious. So, if he takes Aurelia back now, will it make him even crazier? As for the last person, he was a somewhat handsome young swordsman. He is the most normal-looking one among the 3, but he may also be the most perverted one. Kill Eden in space. The speed with which he drew his sword was as fast as lightning, as if he were moving instantly. At the same time, his favorite thing to do is to feel the screams and struggles of his temporary lover while slitting his temporary lover's throat. Eden expressed love to Herman many times, but was rejected by Herman. Even though Herman thought he was not a good person, he always kept a distance from Eden. These 3 people committed countless crimes and were wanted by the Kingdom of Granville and the Church of the Dawn Goddess. They were eventually captured alive. His father saw that these 3 people still had some strength, so he used some means to catch them outside casually. 3 men of similar size were sent to the guillotine, and the 3 of them were replaced. Secret skills were planted in their bodies, and they were arranged to serve as bodyguards next to Herman. Ron's strongest strength is only 1-star disaster, and among these 3, 1-star disaster, 1-star disaster, 2-star disaster. This time, I have the real advantage. If you don't believe it, you can't kill Ron. The smile on Herman's face became stronger and stronger. Do you think that if Ron was really a prophet, would he know that we were going to kill him? In the grinning mouth, you can clearly see that Herman's teeth seemed to have become sharper, like canine teeth, and even showed a slight curve. Simon's angry voice came, directly denying Ron's identity as a prophet. No way, absolutely impossible. For thousands of years, there has been only one person who can truly be called a prophet, and that is Archibald. The handsome young swordsman Eden also expressed his thoughts. It is said that he left a book before he went crazy. The prophecy foretells the disasters that the world may face thousands of years from now. It's just that the prophecy was written in a language invented by Archibald himself. It should be the filthy words he used to curse the gods before he died. For thousands of years, although some people have occasionally found fragments of prophecy books, it has been difficult to decipher the writing. This Ron probably just found some broken pages of the prophecy book somewhere, and then came out to pretend to be a ghost. After all, this guy is a scholar of ancient writing, so it is not surprising that he can decipher some of the contents. Don't worry, young master. The 3 of us will take action and we will definitely take down Ron. Herman put his hands on his hands and smiled. That's very good. Wait until Ron comes out of the Otis weapons store and take action immediately. Herman didn't want to cause trouble in the Otis weapons store. After all, the owner of the weapons store was very powerful. He didn't want to be interfered by irrelevant factors in the process of killing Ron. Remember, don't hurt Aurelia. It's best not to kill Ron directly. I'll make him understand what despair means. Herman said ferociously. All the humiliation and pain he has suffered must be experienced by Ron. Aurelia, I will let you know who is the man who is truly worthy of you. Inside the store, Ron sat on the chair and waited quietly, thinking in his mind. With his current strength, he should not be Virgil's opponent, but if he can buy a good purple excellent grade weapon and strengthen it to the 13th level, even Virgil, a disaster level 7-star master, might be able to do it. You can have a fight in a short time. I just don't know what the strength of the 3 killers outside is. I hope they aren't all at Virgil's level. He really can't handle 3 of them at once. Of course, Ron is not without means to save his life, such as the special effects attached to the Ring of Hercules and the protection of Hercules. Inspired by the power of Hercules, he descended upon himself. This move may cause an exaggerated burden on the body, but on the other hand, Ron's strength will also increase several times. Ron knew about the special task of upgrading the Ring of Hercules, but he couldn't complete it in Larnaca City. Plus the ultimate dodge that can be used once per day. If you really can't defeat the opponent, you should have no problem escaping. It's a pity that Herman started a little too early. If Ron was given enough time to buy a complete set of purple equipment, all of which were fully strengthened, then he really wouldn't have anything to worry about. Ron is very quiet. In comparison, Aurelia is more lively. The slender body walked back and forth among the shelves, seeming to be very interested in these weapons. Not long after, footsteps came from the inner hall. Ron followed the sound and looked over, and Morimo's fat body reappeared in front of him. He was holding in his arms. Yes, he was holding a slender magic wand, about 1 meter and 2 meters, very hard. All black, as thick as a Childa's arm. The surface is smooth, and seems to be polished from some kind of wood, but it shines with a metallic luster. The head of the stick looks like a tree tumor, uneven, but polished to be very round. From Morimo's flushed face and grunting posture, he could tell that this staff fully met Ron's needs. He is very heavy, very hard too. It can definitely blow the enemy's head off at once. Finally, Morlimo walked up to Ron, and he carefully placed the staff on the table in front of Ron. Bang! Even though Morimo was very careful, he still made a dull sound. The table squeaked and groaned. Sir, I think this weapon should meet your requirements. Morlimo wiped the sweat from his forehead and gasped. Ron stood up. This is a weapon forged by Master Otis himself. This is an attempt by the Master. As you know, general staffs prefer to use incense wood, moonwood, and black sycamore. When combined with mithril, it has great magic penetration. Advantages, but these staffs themselves are quite fragile and cannot withstand strong impacts, and are easily damaged or even broken. Morimo introduced nonchalantly. Master Otis was prepared to change this situation, so he chose ironwood that had never been used by anyone, and it was still 100 years old. As you know, ironwood is harder than steel. The magic forged from ironwood, the staff has definitely reached its limit in terms of strength. See that burl above? Trust me, it fits your needs perfectly. Moreover, Master Otis has only forged one such century-old ironwood magic wand. It is an out-of-print weapon, and you deserve it. Only one was forged, isn't it, because the century-old ironwood magic wand couldn't be sold at all? Apart from anything else, not many magicians can pick up this weight alone. Why did the shortcomings turn into advantages when it came to this guy's mouth? As expected of a salesperson, Ron ignored Morimo's words and stretched out his right hand towards the magic wand. Be careful, it's heavy. Morlimo warned from the side. If Ron hurt his wrist, there would be another trouble. After all, the other party is a priest. Although Master Otis is very famous, he is only a craftsman and businessman after all, and his status is not on the same level as a priest. He even wanted to see Ron make a fool of himself. But he was worried that if the young master didn't pick it up right away, would he become angry? Morlimo regretted a little. Maybe he shouldn't have taken out the magic wand. This kind of young master, especially in front of his female companion, values a face most. Once you can't pick it up, feel embarrassed, and make trouble here, it will be troublesome. Morlimo wanted to stop it, but it was too late. Ron's fingertips had already landed on the ironwood, which was a little cold. A few fingers grasped the stick body. The next second, under Morimo's surprised eyes, the heavy ironwood left the table with a roar, and Ron grabbed it with one hand. He waved a few times casually. Woo, woo, woo. The sound of tearing the air was heavy and textured. The fat on Morlimo's face kept trembling. He wanted to see Ron make a fool of himself, but he didn't expect that he would be the one to make a fool of himself. He almost couldn't help but scream. This century-old ironwood magic wand weighs 82 pounds. Not to mention magicians, even some weaker warriors would not be able to pick it up with one hand. Even if they could pick it up, they would never be able to wave it around like this. Why did the magic wand that I groaned to death from exhaustion seem to have no weight at all in this guy's hand? The most exaggerated thing is that this guy even used the magic wand as a slender sword and pulled out a sword flower, ah no, a wand flower. He wanted to ask, are you really a mage? Seeing the pitch-black staff whizzing past in front of him, Morlemo silently took 2 steps back. After all, if he didn't hold this thing firmly and let it go, his head would instantly turn into a watermelon hit by a hammer. Finally, Ron stopped. He took a look at the properties. Ironwood staff. Purple is excellent, it is a staff, not a hammer. Enhancement level, 0. Magic attack +4. Physical attack +127. Additional special attributes, strength +98. Additional special effect, physical damage bonus of 10%. When you have no magic power, you will find that this staff is so good. Although it is only purple equipment, as a weapon, its additional attack power is a little higher than the epic ring of Hercules. Ron exhaled and glanced at Morlemo. Is there anything heavier? Morlemo's lips trembled slightly, and after a long while he breathed out, sorry, sir, no more. Okay. Ron did not put down the staff and wanted to ask about the price. System Elsa seems to be particularly active today. From Ron's sight, he could see a pair of small white hands silently encircling his neck from behind, and his black and white hair began to ripple in front of his eyes. From the corner of his eye, he could even see Elsa's delicate profile. Those beautiful cheeks are like a real goddess, incomparably beautiful. Slightly pale, bloodless lips slowly came to Ron's ear. It was clear that Ron knew very well that Elsa had no real body. But at this moment, Ron had the strange feeling of Elsa's pink lips holding his ear. The inexplicable itching made his breathing quicken. Beep, the system prompts that the infinite death system is enabled. Mission background. You are a traitor. Although you did not actively join the Eternal Freedom Sect, in their eyes, you are a shameful traitor for joining the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. The Eternal Freedom Sect will never give any mercy to traitors. A patrol officer is on his way to find you. Mission goal. Survive. That is a powerful patrol envoy, she is really strong. Task rewards. Distributed according to your means of survival. Countdown to death. 3,600 seconds. Double death warning. Herman's death warning was not resolved, and the inspection order of the Eternal Freedom Sect came. Even Ron couldn't help but have a headache. Since Herman wanted to kill him, the killer he found was naturally not trash. As for the patrolling envoys of the Eternal Freedom Sect, not to mention, they are all similar to Virgil, especially since Elsa specifically named them as powerful patrolling envoys. This shows that this person is probably the best among the 36 patrol envoys, and maybe stronger than Bishop Virgil. It would be absolutely terrible if both groups showed up together. Even though Ron was getting stronger and stronger, he couldn't help but look solemn. As a little villain, I am really quite miserable. If I could be reincarnated into a big boss, maybe the outcome would still be bad, but at least I wouldn't have to be in such a mess because of these little enemies. Also, this Eternal Freedom Sect is really unreasonable. It was obviously you who forced me to come here. If I don't do it, is it actually apostasy? Are there still laws or laws? Ron complained in his mind. Gentlemen, Morlemo's voice sounded nearby. Ron exhaled slightly, and his slightly solemn face returned to its original gentleness, just this one. An innocent smile broke out on Morlemo's face. Hello, 800 gold coins. Ron's body leaned back subconsciously. Even though Ron had already known what kind of person Morlemo was, he was still shocked by this number. 800. Why don't you go and grab it? Morlemo also seemed to feel that the price he gave was a little high. He originally thought that the young master had a female companion, and for the sake of face, he might bite the bullet and become this big grievance. However, it seems that this gentleman does not agree with this. He was very thick-skinned and showed no embarrassment at all. He spread his hands casually and said, Sir, you know, we are doing a transaction, and the transaction is conducted through bargaining. It makes perfect sense and is completely irrefutable. Ron was slightly satisfied. 20 gold coins. Morlemo looked at Ron in awe, knowing that he had met his opponent this time. I have encountered someone who cut off the price halfway up the mountain, but this was the first time I encountered someone who cut off the heel with a knife. Sir, your price is too outrageous. Morlemo shook his head and smiled bitterly. 20 gold coins, you can't even buy this piece of iron wood. 750 gold coins, no more. 80. Ron stopped joking and revealed another number. 700. 80. 605. 80. Morlemo's lips began to tremble. Sir, without you bargaining like this, we wouldn't be able to negotiate this business. Our Master Otis's work's only worth 80 gold coins in your heart. More wada s more, this is out of print and very collectible. Ron said. What I want to buy is a weapon, not a work of art. If you want to emphasize the collection value, I suggest you take it to the auction house. If someone really appreciates its artistic value, let alone 800 gold coins, even if it is possible to sell it for 8,000. Are you kidding? Did his money come from the strong wind? It was something that was earned with so much hard work, it wasn't easy. There is no way to get him to spend an extra penny. This is not stingy, this is frugal. I do not deny the skills of Master Otis. The whole world now believes that dwarf craftsmen are the most talented race in the forging of weapons and equipment. All well-known weapons currently are made by dwarves, but I believe Master Otis's skills are by no means inferior to those of the dwarf craftsmen. Ron peered out of the corner of his eye and saw a head covered with white hair quietly emerging from the back hall. The familiar figure made him emphasize. No, Master Otis is better than the dwarf craftsman. The white-haired head nodded vigorously, his wrinkled face full of joy. Because Master Otis is a human, he understands humans better than the dwarf craftsman and is better able to forge weapons suitable for human physiques. Pity those ignorant people who only admire the false reputation of dwarf craftsmen, but don't know that there is a real master here. This is simply a loss for the entire human race. Ron was filled with indignation and seemed quite unfair to Master Otis's current treatment. Morlemo screamed in his heart that it was bad and wanted to stop him, but Ron would not give him any chance to speak. It's just that although I admire Master Otis, I am not stupid. Although this weapon is purple and excellent, you must understand that it is a staff, not a hammer. Its magic attack power is only a pitiful 4 points. If you dare to sell such a weapon for 800 gold coins, won't your conscience hurt? Isn't this what you want? Hard enough and heavy enough to smash someone else's head. You didn't ask for magic attack power at all, right? Morlemo wanted to defend, but a figure quickly rushed out from behind. Morlemo's eyesight went dark. It was over, and the commission that reached his mouth flew away. It was an old man who was slightly short but extremely strong. Although his beard and hair were all white, he was still energetic. He rushed to Ron like a gust of wind and grabbed Ron's hand. Little brother, you are very discerning. Those idiots with eyes in their butts. How dare you say that I am not as good as those dwarfs, idiots, they are all a bunch of idiots. You were right, this is just my failure. The price of 800 gold coins is really outrageous. I will give this weapon to you, little brother. Faintly, it seems that you can hear Morimo's lament. For Morimo, if you don't make money, it is a loss. Ron was a little shy. Master, how can you be so embarrassed? Having said that, Ron had no intention of letting go of the ironwood staff. Prostitution for free can really make people feel happy. Master Otis waved his hand casually, saying that he didn't need to care at all. Ron's heartfelt praise made him very comfortable. This is just a weapon. The most important thing I lack here is a weapon. If it weren't for us, the age gap between us is so big that I want to recognize you as my younger brother. Oh, Brother Otis, you are so polite. Age has never been a problem. You will be my brother from now on. Good brother. Seeing the appearance of Ron and Otis, Aurelia next to her opened her mouth slightly. For the first time, she realized that her lover was so shameless. At this moment, Otis also looked at Aurelia. Because of Ron, he also looked at Aurelia particularly well. Is this little girl your girlfriend? She is indeed a natural a couple. Otis rubbed his hands, and then took out a silver-covered magic book from the storage ring. Brother, I don't have anything good here, so I will give you this magic book as a meeting gift. Morlemo is about to cry but has no tears left. Can't he survive this day? Ron glanced at it. Purple was excellent. Although it was also purple, it was obviously much better than the staff in his hand. It belonged to the type that was infinitely close to epic. Almost all of the additional attributes were a large amount of bonus magic value. For a chanter like Aurelia who needs to consume a lot of magic power, it is extremely suitable. If you meet the right person, this magic book might be sold for 800 gold coins, which is more than Ron's entire assets. Ron kept winking at Aurelia, who looked strange, but finally accepted the magic book and said sweetly, "Thank you, Brother Otis." Otis was overjoyed and beaming. It was clear that he had given away 2 excellent purple weapons for nothing, but Otis was very happy. "I originally came here to buy a weapon, but I didn't expect to get more than I imagined." Ron took a deep breath. "Aurelia, please stay here and don't move around. I'll go out to buy a bottle of wine and have a few drinks with Brother Otis. I'll be back soon." It was almost time to deal with the trash under Herman. He didn't want to delay the time and let the 3 killers and the patrol officer appear at the same time. Ron walked toward the door, and with the help of the half-open door, he kept placing strengthening stones on the ironwood staff. The lips moved slightly. Praise the goddess of dawn. The successfully strengthened white light was covered by the sunlight outside the door. No one knew that the weapon in Ron's hand was becoming more and more exaggerated. Ironwood staff. Purple is excellent, it is born for killing. Enhancement level 13. Magic attack plus 74. Physical attack plus 2163. Additional special attributes. Strength plus 98. Additional special effect. Physical damage bonus of 10%. Additional special effect. Shattered armor. All defenses are crumbs in front of it. Additional special effect. Berserker. When the holder uses the staff to attack directly, there is a probability of causing double damage. Additional special requirements. Strength value is greater than 500. Go and destroy. Go and destroy. When you can pick up this weapon, you will find that magic is so small. Because it is only a purple weapon, the attack multiplier of strengthening and increasing by 13 is not as exaggerated as that of epic equipment, but it cannot support the high enough base value. Among the 3 additional effects, there is even one that is a negative effect, but the 500 power value is no pressure for Ron, a genuine mage and priest. As for the broken armor and the berserker, they were born purely for killing. Now, even Virgil wouldn't be able to withstand a random attack from him, right? At the same time, in the attic opposite, a pair of eyes were fixed on the figure leaving towards the door. Maddie, the eviscerating knife, grasped the dagger tightly, and Eden, the space slasher, grasped the long sword at her waist. Herman's voice sounded. "Do it." Ron put the staff back into the ring and walked toward the door step by step. It seemed that he was walking normally, but Ron's spirit was already extremely tense. He couldn't let Aurelia get involved. Although Ron was very confident in his current strength, he still wasn't sure about protecting Aurelia when 3 killers attacked. What's more, there is also a patrol envoy from the Eternal Freedom sect. So he asked Aurelia to stay in the hall, just for a while. Bada, ba, crisp footsteps. Ron's body finally walked out of the Otis weapons store. Almost at the same time, a dazzling white light suddenly flashed above the attic opposite. Buzz. The sharp blade tore through the air. It was no longer like a person thrusting out a long sword, but more like a long sword driving a person soaring. In an instant, Ron's eyes were divided into 2 obvious upper and lower levels. In the attic, Herman was shaking with excitement. The inexplicable excitement even gave him goosebumps all over his body. He was breathing heavily like a lunatic. His eyes were so wide that they were almost about to pop out of their sockets. Dead. Ron was dead. No one knows better than Herman how terrifying Eden's space slash is. The most frightening thing is that Eden never acts alone. The cooperation with Maddie the Bone Eviscerator and Simon the Blood Axe can form a sure kill situation. Even if the strength is 1 level higher than Eden, the 3-star disaster level, people with 4 stars are also likely to be angry on the spot. Ron is good, but at best he is a disaster. With such an advantage, Herman really couldn't think of any unexpected possibilities. He couldn't wait to see the blood spurting from Ron's throat. Kill Eden in space. Sure enough, it was these 3 losers who had been following Herman. Eden's sword is really too fast. The power of wind was used to the extreme by Eden, and he seemed to have become the incarnation of wind. That was not the power of space, it was simply too fast speed, which caused the illusion of instantaneous movement. The cold light in front of his eyes continued to expand, expand, expand. It had not yet attacked Ron's body, but Ron even felt a subtle sting coming from his eyes. Careful At this moment, Aurelia's scream suddenly came from behind. Aurelia, who had been watching Ron, did not stay in the hall as Ron had told her to do. Her eyes had always been on Ron. The moment she saw that gleam of cold light, her body was shrouded in bone-chilling ice. Her mind went blank, and Aurelia had no time to think at all. As if out of pure instinct, her body acted before her brain even thought about it. The flying silver hair is like a pure white butterfly, and the open arms are the fragile wings. Aurelia didn't even have time to realize where her power came from, and she didn't even have time to think about what would happen to her. Her speed was faster than ever. Psalm, the wind favors you. She did not chant any incantations, but the power of the chant emerged on its own. The sharp wind rushed into my eyes and ears, causing burning pain. The slender body was weak and fragile, but stubbornly stood in front of Ron. He opened his arms, as if he wanted to use his chest to block the sword light that was about to penetrate his body in the next moment. At this moment, Ron's body trembled slightly. Ron had long known that Herman was planning to assassinate him, and even said that he had already guessed who the 3 killers were. At least, Ron was not afraid of these 3 killers. He believed that he could easily solve them, which was very important to him. There is no danger at all, but the real danger is the patrolling envoys of the Eternal Freedom sect. However, the figure that Aurelia blocked in front of him without hesitation still made his heart tremble slightly. For the first time in a long time, Ron had a different kind of affection for this girl who had been happy more than once. Ron's original extreme dodge was stopped. He can dodge, but Aurelia can't. He raised his left hand and grabbed it towards the sword. I don't know if it was Ron's illusion, but I always felt that Eden's speed had become extremely slow, as if he was in slow motion. The power of chance filled Ron's shortcomings in speed. Everything is actually just a short moment, half a second. Seeing Aurelia standing in front of Ron, Eden frowned slightly, but the sword was unsheathed and could not be taken back. At this moment, Eden suddenly saw Ron's left hand, raised it up at some point, and grabbed it towards the tip of the sword. You actually want to grab his sword with your hands. Idiot, looking for death. Not only Eden, but even Otis thought Ron was finished. The eye-stinging sword light has proven Eden's strength. He is a very terrifying master. Even Master Otis is not sure that he can take this sword. He is a disaster level 2-star master. And Ron is just a weak priest. Tisk, crunch. The next moment, a strange sound came. Eden's figure finally appeared in front of Ron and Aurelia. He stopped, and the proud smile on his face gradually became stiff and was replaced by indescribable horror and distortion. There was deathly silence all around, and the originally noisy streets seemed to have fallen into a strange standstill at this moment. There was no sound at all, and a pair of eyes just looked at Ron's left hand blankly. The thumb and index finger pinched the sharp tip of the sword. The relaxed and comfortable movements, it seems like he is just having fun. No one can describe the shock deep in their hearts. Holding the tip of the sword and grasping the sword are completely different concepts. If this scene hadn't actually been staged in front of their eyes, who would have believed it? Are you just a weak priest? When did the priest's physical skills become so powerful? How can warriors, knights, and thieves, who rely on physical skills to survive, get along? Aurelia finally came back to her senses, her face instantly turned pale, and her body was shaking irregularly. Ron's right hand gently patted Aurelia's head, and his fingers slid along the silky silver hair, gently. The voice sounded in Aurelia's ears. It's okay, Aurelia, it's okay. Everyone around was shocked by the sight of Ron holding the tip of Eden's sword with his bare hands, and could not make any sound. Only Ron smiled gently, stroking Aurelia's long hair and calming the fear in Aurelia's heart. At this moment, the thick fog that had been shrouding Ron's heart quietly dispersed. Did Ron really fall in love with Aurelia? Emotional matters are very complicated, and even Ron himself doesn't know what his true thoughts are deep inside. In Ron's eyes, the relationship between him and Aurelia was more like a series of coincidences driven by some mysterious force. Although he had fun with Aurelia more than once, that was not love. It's not even Aurelia's one-sided love. If Aurelia knew the truth, would she still love her as deeply as before? Not necessarily. Ron reminded himself more than once that this is just a game. Although it has been many days since he came to this world, Ron has never really integrated into this world, and has never even made any efforts in this regard. But at this moment, Ron's idea changed. This is not a game, this is a real, flesh and blood world. What appeared in front of him was a woman who loved him deeply and was willing to give up everything for him. Aurelia could feel Ron's gaze, which warmed her, and she seemed to be surrounded by happiness. This kind of happiness had appeared before, but it was like a dreamy bubble, which only made Aurelia afraid, as if it may disappear at any time. But now, the temperature of happiness has reached the bottom of Aurelia's heart and her soul. Beep, the system prompts that Aurelia's favorability towards you has increased. The current favorability is infinite. The favorability level cannot be assessed. Beep, the system prompts, congratulations to the host for completing special task 1, conquer the White Saint Aurelia and obtain the Holy Heart. Aurelia has fallen. Here comes the second chapter. Ida embarrassing. Guys, don't think just because our last chapter was called A Free Prostitution makes me happier, it really means that we did it for free. Didn't we even give us the tickets? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.